On the 42nd floor of the Cole International Tower, the city stretched beneath the glass walls like a glittering map, neat, organized, glowing with late evening lights. To anyone looking in from the outside, the office belonged to a man who had mastered life. A man with power, intelligence, and influence over half the developments in Charlotte, North Carolina. But to the man sitting in the dark corner of that office, none of it felt like victory. Benjamin Cole leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the framed photographs arranged neatly on the shelf behind his desk. He didn't keep many, just enough to remind him of the life he once had. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else. In one photo, his wife, Camille, smiled with soft hazel eyes, her hair blowing in the wind as she held their young son during a family hike. Benjamin stood beside them, stiff in posture, as if he were posing for a business magazine rather than a family memory. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair and exhaled deeply. Even after 5 years, the ache sat heavy in his chest. The world knew his wife passed suddenly. Only Benjamin knew how much of his heart had died with her. The clock on the wall ticked, breaking the silence in slow, measured beats. Most employees had already gone home. The building was quiet, a perfect reflection of how Benjamin's personal life felt, spacious, expensive, and empty. He stood, buttoning his charcoal suit jacket, and crossed the room to the window. From here he could see everything: traffic threading through the streets, families walking to restaurants, laughter drifting up faintly from the sidewalks below. He watched it the way a man behind a glass cage might watch freedom. Down there, people were headed home to someone. He was merely heading back to a penthouse that echoed with silence. Benjamin grabbed his coat and walked out. His driver wasn't working that night, so he preferred to take the wheel, something grounding about driving himself through the city, as though it allowed him to feel human again. The elevator lowered slowly. When it opened, the lobby receptionist gave him a polite smile. "Have a good night, Mr. Cole." "You too, Rachel." He stepped into the cool night air. The wind carried the smell of street food, rain on pavement, and something else, something he always felt this time of night: longing. His jet-black Escalade beeped as he unlocked it. He slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled into traffic. The city hummed around him, but none of it pierced the numbness that had settled into his bones over the years. He drove without music. Silence was the only companion he trusted. As he merged onto Hawthorne Lane, something tugged at his thoughts, something he had been avoiding all day. It was a date he never forgot. The anniversary of his wife's death. He felt the familiar squeeze in his chest. 5 years and the pain still struck like it was new. He had thrown himself into work, pouring energy into deals, projects, and expansions. It had kept him busy but not whole. Worst of all was the distance between him and his son. Gil, 20 years old now, in college, barely spoke to him. Benjamin rarely admitted it aloud, but the truth was he had failed the boy. After Camille died, he shut down emotionally, unable to function outside of business meetings and boardrooms. He thought giving Caleb money, security, and stability was enough. It wasn't. Caleb needed a father. Benjamin gave him an employer. He gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. He had been thinking about calling Caleb all day, maybe taking him out for dinner, but the fear of rejection had kept him silent. Every time his phone buzzed with an unknown number, he wished it were his son. And every time it wasn't, the hollow ache grew deeper. The roadway narrowed as he approached the stoplight at 8th Street. The light flicked to red. Benjamin slowed to a stop, resting his elbow on the window frame. He stared absently at the pedestrian crossing. A couple laughed as they walked by, the woman clutching a bouquet of flowers. A jogger with headphones bounced in place waiting for the light. 2 kids rushed past on scooters. Normal life. The kind he no longer fit into. He sighed and leaned back. But then, something at the corner of his eye shifted. Something he almost missed. A small figure stood alone near a streetlight pole. Too small, too still, too quiet. Benjamin frowned and squinted through the windshield. It was a child. A little girl. She stood holding a cardboard sign, large, uneven handwriting across the front. Her dark braids were pulled into 2 neat puffs, and her jacket was far too light for the biting February air. Benjamin's pulse slowed as he leaned forward, trying to make out the words. The jogger glanced at her but kept moving. A pair of women walked by, whispering something before hurrying across the street. The girl didn't look up. She just wiped her face with her sleeve. Benjamin narrowed his eyes, focusing until the letters came into view. His breath hitched. Need a dad for the father-daughter dance. He blinked as if he wasn't sure he'd read it right. The little girl's shoulders shook slightly. She wasn't loudly crying. There was no tantrum, no drama. Just quiet, fragile heartbreak. Benjamin's throat tightened unexpectedly. The light turned green. Cars behind him honked. The jogger jogged away. Families passed. Everyone moved on. But Benjamin didn't. His foot remained frozen on the brake. Something inside him, something he thought had died years ago, twisted sharply. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe. This wasn't something he could just drive past and forget. The horns behind him grew more aggressive. Benjamin flipped on his hazard lights, pulled over to the curb and parked. He sat there for a moment, the engine purring softly, his heart beating louder than the city noise. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what had happened to her. He didn't know why she was alone on a cold night in February. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Benjamin opened the door, stepped into the night, and felt a strange, unsettling certainty settle over him. A feeling that whatever was happening on that street corner wasn't random. It was the beginning. The beginning of something that would change his life. And hers. He just didn't know it yet. The late afternoon sun stretched across the quiet bus terminal, painting long shadows on the cracked concrete. People moved with hurried footsteps, some dragging suitcases, some clutching plastic bags, some lost in their own storms. And right there, in the middle of the noise, stood her, the small girl whose presence somehow silenced the world around her. She couldn't have been more than 9, thin braids framing her round cheeks, a faded pink backpack slung across her shoulder, and a look in her eyes that made anyone who noticed her pause for a heartbeat. Not fear. Not anger. Something deeper. A quiet kind of sadness. The type that didn't come from scraped knees or bad grades but from life itself. She stood in front of the water dispenser, watching the cup she had placed under the tap fill drop by drop. She waited patiently even though the machine was painfully slow. Too slow. Most adults would have complained or smacked the side of the machine. But she just waited. As if she had nowhere to rush to. As if she had learned patience the hard way. Jacob, the millionaire CEO in the making, though nobody in that terminal knew who he was, watched her from a few benches away. He had been trying to calm his spiraling thoughts after the unpleasant confrontation with his lawyer, the argument still replaying in his mind. But somehow this little girl, her calmness, her sadness, stole his attention completely. She took the cup of water carefully, holding it with 2 hands, and walked toward a small bench. On the bench lay a woman, thin, exhausted, her head resting on a rolled-up sweater. Her breathing was shallow. Her clothes looked worn. Jacob's brows pulled together. The girl knelt beside the woman, whispered something softly, then lifted the cup to her lips. The woman drank slowly. The girl held the cup steady. The scene hit Jacob like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a child waiting for a parent. This was a child taking care of one. He didn't mean to stare, but his attention was trapped. Something about them felt familiar, not in a literal sense but in the way life stories sometimes mirror each other. Years ago he had been small and helpless too, caring for someone who couldn't care for themselves. His throat tightened. The girl stood again, dusting off the hem of her skirt. She looked around, probably searching for something. Help, maybe? Or hope. It was then that their eyes met. She froze. Jacob did too. For a split second, the world quieted and all he saw was her sadness, and something else. Something like courage. Maybe desperation. Or maybe a child forced to grow up too fast. She held his gaze longer than a child normally would, as if she was trying to understand him, trying to read him. Children have that instinct, the ability to sense kindness or danger. And Jacob? He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. A tug, a calling, a strange familiarity. Slowly she walked toward him. Barely 4 steps away she stopped, hugging the pink backpack close to her chest. she began in a small voice, almost trembling. "Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to bother you." Jacob straightened. "You're not bothering me," she swallowed. Nervous, hopeful. Could you please meet my mom?" she asked softly. Jacob blinked. "Meet your mom?" She nodded, eyes watering, but she wasn't crying. The tears were disciplined, held tightly in place. You look sad. And my mom always talks to sad people. She says people like you sometimes just need someone to hear them." His heart dropped. This child was trying to help him? He stared at her, speechless. She took a small step closer. "She's very nice. But she's sick, and," she looked down, twisting her fingers together, "and people don't talk to her anymore because of how she looks. But she's still nice. And she always tries to help people when she can." Jacob followed her gaze back to the bench. The woman was too thin. Her face pale. Exhausted. Drained. Not the look of someone dangerous. The look of someone life had beaten and beaten again. He exhaled slowly. "What's your name?" "Amara," she whispered. Amara. It fit her. Soft. Gentle. Carrying a quiet strength. "Is your mom okay?" he asked gently. Amara's lips parted, but she hesitated as if searching for the right answer. The honest one. The brave one. Instead she said, "She's trying to be." It was the kind of answer that breaks you more than the truth. Jacob stood. "All right, Amara. Let's go." Her eyes brightened, not with joy but with relief. She led the way quickly, almost protectively, as if she feared he might change his mind. When they reached the bench, Amara knelt by her mother again. "Mom," she whispered, tapping her shoulder, "there's someone I want you to meet." The woman opened her eyes slowly. Tired, painful. Then she turned her gaze to Jacob. Embarrassment flickered across her face, not because of him but because of her condition. Because life had reduced her to a place where strangers saw her like this. Jacob felt that same tug again. "Hello," the woman murmured weakly. He knelt slightly so he wasn't towering over her. I'm Jacob. Thank you for coming." Her voice cracked. "My daughter, she means well." Jacob glanced at Amara, who stood nervously behind him. Then back at the woman. "It's no trouble," he said softly. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman tried to smile. "We're okay. Just tired. Been traveling a long time." Amara squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, tell him." The woman sighed, the weight of the world in that breath. "I don't like bothering people with my problems." "But he looks sad, Mom," Amara whispered. "You always help sad people." Jacob's chest tightened again. This mother, sick, struggling, exhausted, was still trying to help others. Still teaching her daughter compassion when she barely had strength left. He felt a lump rise in his throat. Without thinking, he sat on the bench beside them. "Then maybe," he said quietly, "today it's my turn to help you." Amara's eyes widened. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, silent ones this time. Jacob didn't know why he said it. He didn't know why he felt so drawn to them. But something about this moment, about these two strangers, felt like fate pressing pause on his life and whispering, "Pay attention." He didn't know it yet. But this girl, this little girl with the sad eyes, was about to change everything. The wind had grown colder as Jacob, still thinking of himself as Benjamin Cole, followed Amara and her mother down the narrow sidewalks of Charlotte's Maplewood district. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the uneven pavement. Shops had closed hours ago, leaving only the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. The kind of quiet that made you notice everything, especially people who didn't belong or shouldn't be alone. Amara walked with purpose, her small hand gripping her mother's sleeve. She didn't glance back. It was clear she had done this before, navigating the streets, checking every corner, judging each passerby. Benjamin noticed how she paused for cars, waited patiently, then darted across when it was safe, as though she were balancing courage and fear with each step. When they reached a corner near a low brick building, Benjamin's gaze fell on the cardboard sign she had carried the entire way. He hadn't gotten a proper look at it yet. Even in the dim light, the black marker letters were clear. Need a dad for the father-daughter dance? Please help. The words struck him in a way he hadn't expected. It wasn't just the plea or the innocence behind it, it was the vulnerability, the sheer honesty. A child asking for something as simple as companionship at a school dance, because someone who should have been there wasn't. He felt an unexpected ache in his chest. Not guilt exactly, but something close. Something that reminded him of all the missed birthdays, all the missed milestones, all the moments he hadn't been there for his own son. Amara noticed his stare and flinched slightly. Her tiny shoulders hunched as if expecting him to dismiss her. But Benjamin, still quiet, stepped closer. He knelt to her level. "Amara," he said gently, his voice low. "You're really brave to be standing here with this sign. But, are you sure about this? Do you know who you're asking for help?" Amara's lips trembled. I don't care," she admitted. I wanted someone who cares. That's all. Just one person to care. Even for one night." Benjamin's throat tightened. He could feel the lump forming, threatening to escape as he swallowed. He knew in that instant that he couldn't just walk away. Not from her. Not from this moment. Her mother, Tamika Daniels, shuffled nervously behind her daughter. She had noticed Benjamin watching, and for a moment she feared he might just disappear. He was a stranger, after all, a man in a sharp suit, the kind of man who usually belonged in skyscrapers and boardrooms, not here on a cracked sidewalk in the cold February wind. "Please," Amara whispered, clutching the cardboard sign tighter. "Please don't go." Benjamin felt an internal tug he didn't recognize. There was logic here that screamed caution, that told him to stay in his bubble of control, wealth, and safety. But something stronger overrode it, a pure, innocent need. And he knew instinctively that if he walked away, she would be left disappointed again. And disappointment, especially at that age, carried a weight that could break a child's heart. He exhaled slowly and offered a small, careful smile. "All right," he said softly. "Let's go meet your mom." Amara's eyes lit up, not fully with joy but with cautious hope. She led the way, almost pulling him, until they reached a small apartment building tucked behind a cluster of aging brick facades. The windows were dim, some with curtains drawn, some cracked open slightly. Benjamin noticed the faint smell of cold winter air mixed with something slightly sweet, probably the lingering scent of baked goods or cleaning detergent. Inside, the apartment was cramped but clean. The living room had a threadbare rug and a small sofa pushed against one wall. A kitchen table, cluttered with papers and an old laptop, stood near the window. And there, in the middle of the room, was Tamika Daniels herself, tired, frail, but still alert. She had deep lines on her face that spoke of struggle, resilience, and countless sacrifices. "Mom?" Amara ran forward, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "I want you to meet someone." Tamika blinked up at Benjamin, unsure whether to trust him. Her gaze darted between her daughter and this stranger. I don't know," she said, her voice hesitant. "Amara, you shouldn't." "Please," Amara interrupted softly but firmly. He's nice. He looks like he understands. Please?" Benjamin held up his hands, signaling peace. "I promise I mean no harm. I just want to meet her. That's all." Tamika studied him carefully. She had learned long ago not to judge people by appearances alone. Wealth, suits, or charm didn't matter. It was the heart behind the words that counted. Amara's mother sighed, fatigue and hope colliding in her expression. "All right," she said finally. "You can come in." Benjamin stepped inside, taking in the modest surroundings. Everything here spoke of effort, of struggle, of making do with what little life had given. And yet there was warmth too. A home built not of luxury but of love, persistence, and care. He extended his hand, and Tamika hesitated for only a moment before shaking it. "I'm Benjamin," he said. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Tamika's lips curved into a tired, cautious smile. "Tamika," she replied. "And this is my daughter, Amara." Benjamin knelt down again to face Amara. "You have a very brave daughter," he said to Tamika. "She's remarkable." Amara's eyes widened slightly, pride mixing with shyness. Benjamin felt something stir deep in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. a longing, a recognition of what he had lost and what he could still be part of. Then he noticed something that made his heart skip. The way Amara's small hand still gripped that cardboard sign. The letters were uneven, childish, but desperate. She hadn't just created this sign for fun. This was a cry for help. Tamika's gaze followed his. I'm sorry, she whispered. She's always trying to fix things for people, even when she has nothing herself. She just wants someone to be there. I can't always. Benjamin held up a hand. You don't have to explain. I understand. I just want to help. That's all. For a moment, the room was quiet. Only the faint hum of the heater filled the air. Amara stared at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Tamika studied him with the kind of scrutiny born from years of survival and distrust. Benjamin knew this was a pivotal moment, not just for Amara, not just for her mother, but for himself. One choice here could change everything. One step could set a course he never imagined he'd take. And in that silence, the world outside the apartment seemed to pause. The storm of questions and fears had not passed. The shadows at the edge of that room seemed heavier, as though waiting for him to decide. Waiting to see whether he would step forward or retreat. Benjamin's heart pounded, his palms slightly damp. Something in him told him that what he did next would define more than just one evening. It would define lives. It would define him. And at that moment, before he could speak, a sudden knock sounded at the apartment door. Benjamin froze. Someone was on the other side. Who could it be? Was this just coincidence, or had fate arrived a second time? The answer would not wait. The knock at the apartment door echoed through the small living room, reverberating off the worn walls. Benjamin's pulse quickened. He didn't expect anyone else tonight. In fact, he had come here purely to meet Amara's mother, Tamika, and to somehow understand the depth of the little girl's courage. Yet now, with a simple knock, the world seemed to tilt slightly, as if warning him that this encounter was about to become more complicated. Tamika hesitated. Her hand rested on the door handle, fingers trembling ever so slightly. I don't know who it is, she whispered. Her voice carried exhaustion, caution, and a flicker of fear that Benjamin instantly recognized. Not because he had ever been in her shoes, but because he had seen people in need hesitate when the unknown knocked at their door. Amara gripped her mother's arm, tiny fingers pressing into the fabric of Tamika's sleeve. Mom, maybe it's someone who can help, she said, eyes wide, her hope barely contained. There was innocence in her tone, a belief that the world still had good people left in it. Benjamin felt that same belief stirring inside himself, a quiet, stubborn ember that refused to die, even after years of cold solitude. Tamika took a deep breath and slowly opened the door. No one stood in the hallway. Only the dim light of the building's corridor. And yet, there was a faint rustle, a movement in the shadows that made Benjamin instinctively shift slightly in front of Amara. Hello. Tamika's voice was tentative. A young neighbor, probably no older than 18, peeked out from behind the doorway across the hall. She looked at Benjamin with wide eyes and a mixture of curiosity and caution. Hi, she said nervously. Sorry to bother you, ma'am. I just saw someone outside. I thought. She trailed off, glancing at Benjamin and then at the cardboard sign Amara still held close. Benjamin straightened, forcing a polite smile. No problem, he said gently. I'm Benjamin. I came here because I noticed this little girl outside. She seemed like she needed someone to talk to. The neighbor blinked, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I saw her too. She's brave. Most kids wouldn't stand there by themselves. And that sign, wow. She gave a small shrug, embarrassed at her own words. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. Tamika relaxed slightly, stepping aside to let the neighbor pass if she needed. Thank you for looking out for her, she said, her tone soft but firm. It means a lot. Benjamin watched Amara's eyes follow the neighbor as she disappeared down the hallway, and he felt a pang of empathy for the girl. A child her age shouldn't have to rely on strangers just to be seen. She shouldn't have to hold a cardboard sign pleading for something as simple as a companion for a school dance. And yet here she was, standing tall with that fragile hope in her heart. He crouched slightly to meet her gaze. Amara, he said gently, do you really want me to be the person who helps you for the dance? Amara's lips quivered. I don't know anyone else who can, she admitted. I don't want to go alone. Everyone else will have a dad or someone special. And I don't have anyone. Benjamin swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her that she was brave enough to go alone, that she didn't need anyone to validate her presence. But something in her voice, in the quiet desperation behind her words, stopped him. This was not about courage. This was about a longing that only a child could feel so purely, a longing for belonging, for love, for recognition. Tamika watched the exchange silently, her eyes glistening. She had expected Benjamin to smile politely and leave, like most adults did. But he wasn't leaving. He was kneeling beside her daughter, giving her the attention and validation she hadn't received from anyone else. Benjamin exhaled slowly. Amara, I'd like to help, he said softly. If your mother agrees, I can be someone you can rely on, at least for the dance. I can be your dad for that night. Amara's eyes widened, disbelief mixing with cautious hope. Really? She whispered, clutching her backpack as though it were the most important treasure in the world. Yes, Benjamin said, nodding. Really? Tamika's brow furrowed, and she took a careful step forward. Wait, you don't know us. You don't even know her. Why would you? Benjamin looked at her directly, his voice steady but sincere. Because sometimes we notice when someone needs us. And sometimes the smallest moments, like a child standing on a corner with a sign, remind us of what we've missed in our own lives. The room fell silent. The weight of his words hung in the air. Amara blinked, unsure whether this was really happening. Her mother studied Benjamin's face, searching for signs of deceit, for ulterior motives. But there were none. Only honesty. Only a man who saw something, someone worth caring about, and chose to act. For a moment, it was as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. Outside, the city continued its rhythm of distant sirens, muffled conversations, and the occasional rumble of a passing car. But inside, in that cramped, modest living room, time seemed suspended. Amara stepped forward cautiously. Mom, please, she whispered. Tamika glanced at her daughter. She saw the hope in those small, determined eyes, the kind of hope that refused to die despite years of struggle. And then she looked at Benjamin again. Something about his presence, the calm and quiet way he had approached them, made her feel a strange sense of trust. After a long pause, Tamika nodded slowly. All right, she said quietly. You can help her. But I expect you to treat her with care. Benjamin smiled gently, a weight lifting from his chest. I promise, he said. I will. Amara practically leapt into his arms, hugging him tightly. For Benjamin, the embrace was overwhelming. It was small. It was brief. And yet it carried more power than any handshake, any contract, any business deal he had ever signed. It was a raw human connection. A reminder that wealth, power, and control meant nothing if you couldn't touch a life in a meaningful way. As he held her, he felt a sudden pang of fear, unbidden. What if he failed her? What if he couldn't live up to the hope she had placed in him? He had failed his own son. Could he succeed here with this small, fragile child and not repeat the mistakes of the past? Benjamin straightened, looking into Amara's wide, hopeful eyes. All right, he said softly. Let's get ready for this dance. Amara's eyes sparkled for the first time that evening. Really? She whispered. Yes, he said firmly. Really? But there's something you should know first. She tilted her head, curious. What? Benjamin took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. Tomorrow night, it won't just be about the dance. It will be about you feeling seen. About being celebrated. About someone standing by your side who will make sure you're not alone. Amara's eyes widened further. You mean, you'll be my dad tomorrow? Benjamin hesitated. He wanted to promise her everything, but part of him knew life had its complications. Still, he wanted to try. Yes, Amara, he said. Tomorrow, I'll be your dad. For that night, I'll be here for you. Amara let out a small, excited laugh, but it was quickly tempered by a flicker of nervousness. She glanced at her mother. Mom, Do you think he really will? Tamika smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and caution in her expression. We'll see, baby. We'll see. And outside the apartment window, the city lights flickered, as if holding a secret. Because neither Benjamin nor Amara knew yet that tomorrow night would not just be about the dance. It would be the night that changed everything. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of winter rain and street food from a nearby corner deli. Benjamin followed Amara and her mother down the quiet streets of Maplewood, his polished shoes clicking softly against the uneven pavement. Each step carried a strange mix of anticipation and unease. He wasn't used to neighborhoods like this, not anymore. His world usually consisted of boardrooms, glass towers, and the hum of machines making money. Yet tonight, it was quiet, raw, and painfully human. Amara walked ahead with a small, determined stride, the cardboard sign still clutched in her hands. Benjamin noticed her glancing back repeatedly, almost as if she was ensuring he was keeping up. Her small figure moved with surprising confidence for a child who had clearly learned to face the world without much support. Tamika walked beside Benjamin, glancing nervously at him and then down at the worn sidewalks. It's a long walk from here, she said softly. Her voice carried both caution and gratitude. I hope you don't mind. Benjamin shook his head. Not at all, he said. I don't mind walking. In fact, I think I need it. Tamika's eyes flicked toward him, curiosity mixed with something deeper, hesitation, maybe even a flicker of trust. She didn't ask for his reasons, she didn't need to. Not tonight. As they walked, Benjamin noticed the subtle details of their world. The chipped paint on street lamps, the graffiti curling along brick walls, the small cracks in the pavement. He also noticed something else, the resilience in Amara. The way she moved through these streets without fear, without complaint. The way she held herself, balancing courage and careful calculation. So, how far is your school from here? Benjamin asked, trying to start a conversation and keep the awkward silence from pressing too heavily. Amara glanced at him. It's not far, she said. But no one really comes here. That's why I made the sign. Benjamin glanced down at the cardboard again. The black marker letters were still uneven, but the message was clear. Needed dad for the father-daughter dance. He swallowed. Somehow, the simple words hit him harder than he expected. There were contracts he had signed worth millions, acquisitions that had dominated headlines, but nothing had ever carried the weight of a small, heartfelt plea from a child. Tamika noticed his expression. I don't know why she does it, she murmured almost to herself. She always wants to help people, even when we don't have much. And she just wants someone to be there. Benjamin glanced at Amara. The little girl's head was slightly lowered, her focus on the cracks in the sidewalk. He could see the tiny tremor in her fingers. A nervous tick, or maybe a habit born from having to wait for help that never came. He felt a sudden, sharp pang of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, guilt. Not for himself. Not really. But for the ways life had taught him to avoid vulnerability, for the times he had let others down, most painfully his own son. Benjamin exhaled slowly, the winter air chilling his lungs. Amara, he said quietly, do you have a dad at all? Her head jerked up slightly, but she looked away quickly. Not really, she admitted. He left before I was born. I don't remember him. Benjamin's jaw tightened. He wanted to reach out, to say something comforting, but he stayed silent, letting her words sink into the quiet night. Tamika stepped closer to her daughter. She doesn't talk about it much, she said softly. It's a hard memory. Benjamin nodded, understanding more than he let on. He had missed too many milestones with Caleb, his own son, to not feel this child's pain. It was familiar, too familiar. A reminder of what he had lost. They turned a corner, and Benjamin noticed the apartment buildings lining the street. They were old, some crumbling at the edges, with the faint glow of lights behind worn curtains. Families sat inside, probably sharing dinners, stories, and laughter, the very things Amara was missing in her own life. She's very brave, Benjamin said, glancing down at Amara. You know that. Amara shrugged, trying to hide her vulnerability behind a small, almost shy smile. "I have to be," she said. "Otherwise, I'd be alone." Benjamin felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to be brave all the time, that she deserved someone to stand by her without her having to ask. But he stayed quiet, letting his presence speak instead. Tamika noticed his silence and studied him again, something shifting in her expression. She realized that Benjamin was different, not just a stranger, not just a passerby. He seemed genuine. Unusual for someone so obviously out of her world, someone whose life was built on wealth and influence rather than struggle and survival. As they reached the end of the street, the outline of their apartment building came into view. Benjamin's gaze lingered on it. It was small, humble, and in desperate need of some repairs. But it was home. And for Amara and her mother, it was a fortress of endurance and love, scarred, perhaps, but unbroken. Amara tugged at his sleeve. "It's right there," she said softly, pointing to the small apartment door. Benjamin nodded. "All right," he said. "Let's go inside." They entered, and the familiar sounds of a creaking floorboard and distant city traffic filled the room. Benjamin noticed the faint smell of home-cooked meals and the subtle warmth that only a lived-in space could have. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't grand. But it was real. And somehow, that mattered more than anything he owned in his skyscraper office. Tamika set down a small tray with water and a few crackers. We don't usually have guests," she said almost apologetically. Benjamin smiled gently. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But sometimes, meeting someone unexpected can change everything." Amara looked up at him, eyes wide, and whispered, "Do you really mean that?" Benjamin crouched to her level. "I do," he said. "And tomorrow at your dance, I'll show you exactly what I mean." Amara's face lit with cautious hope, and even Tamika's expression softened, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. Benjamin glanced around the room, taking in the simplicity, the struggle, and the love that clearly held this small family together. He felt a strange sense of responsibility, an unspoken promise forming in his chest. This wasn't just about being a stand-in for a dance. This was about being present, about showing up when someone needed you most. He didn't yet know the challenges, the surprises, or the obstacles that tomorrow would bring. He didn't yet know the emotional collisions that would test him. But he knew this: he would not walk away. Not from Amara. Not from this small, fragile plea that somehow carried more weight than any business deal he had ever closed. And as he watched Amara hug her mother tightly, clutching the cardboard sign to her chest, Benjamin realized that tonight was only the beginning. A beginning that would lead to moments of joy, heartbreak, and revelations he could never have imagined. Because sometimes, life has a way of forcing strangers together, and rewriting the definition of family. And outside, in the quiet winter night, the city seemed to whisper a warning. The next steps are never easy. The next morning arrived with a kind of quiet that felt suspicious. At the Lawrence residence, silence wasn't unusual. Charles often worked late into the night and mornings were typically slow, but today's silence was heavier. It clung to the walls like humidity, thick and waiting. Charles stepped out of his bedroom, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He had a video call with the advisory board at 10 a.m., another at noon, and a press meeting at 3. It should have been a normal day, but something about the air felt wrong. He paused at the top of the staircase, hearing faint clinks, metal on glass. Not loud, not destructive, just enough to make his instincts tighten. He descended the stairs slowly, turning the corner into the foyer, and stopped cold. The glass trophy case, his meticulously organized collection of awards, recognitions, plaques, and milestone achievements from the past 25 years, was wide open. Not shattered, not forced, open. A small figure stood in front of it, a girl barely 10. Ella. She wore one of his oversized hoodies, sleeves hanging beyond her hands. Her hair was a little messy, her socks mismatched, and she stared at the trophies with an expression he couldn't decode, part sadness, part awe, part something darker. For a moment she didn't notice him. She was holding a polished metal trophy, gently tracing the engraved letters with her finger. When she finally turned, she flinched. "Oh, Mr. Lawrence. I didn't touch anything on purpose, I promise. Her voice wavered. I couldn't sleep. Charles blinked, recovering enough to step forward. Ella, you're not in trouble. I just didn't expect to find you here. What's going on? She looked at the trophy again. A Business Excellence Award from 15 years ago. Lightweight compared to the crystal ones. You have so many, she whispered. It's like 100 lifetimes of winning. He let out a slow exhale. I suppose I've collected a few over the years. A few? She huffed softly. This is a museum. He tried to smile, but her words landed with weight. A museum. A place where things were displayed, not lived. He crouched beside her. Why were you up so early? Her lips pressed together and she shrugged, small, fragile, like she was afraid shrugging might break her. When I was at the shelter, she said quietly, they had this broken trophy case. Some kids kept their special finds in it, like shiny wrappers or bottle caps or feathers. Things nobody else cared about. She swallowed. But they cared. A lot. It made them feel like their things mattered. Charles felt a tightening in his chest. He hadn't expected this answer. He hadn't expected any answer that would hit him this hard. And this? He nodded toward the trophy in her hands. Why this one? She held it up carefully. Because it looks like something that might be light enough for a kid to hold. I thought maybe when you won this one you felt proud. Or happy. Or excited enough to jump around a little. She peeked up at him. Do you remember how it felt? He wasn't ready for the question. Not even close. He looked at the award. A metallic gold finish. Slick. Minimalistic. It was from the year his company survived its first major downturn. The year he worked 18-hour days, slept under his desk, and barely ate. It wasn't joy he remembered. It was survival. And loneliness. No, he admitted softly. I don't remember feeling anything at all. She looked disappointed. Not in him, just in the answer. I thought grown-ups would feel things more, she murmured. Not less. That caught him. Art. He didn't know how to respond without revealing the truth, that somewhere along the road to success, he'd traded feeling for functioning. Ella set the trophy back into the case, exactly where she'd found it. She took a step back, staring at the whole display. Then she whispered, I think I opened it because I wanted to know what it feels like to take care of something special. Even if it doesn't belong to me. Her words hit like a blow. Something inside him shifted. He straightened slowly. Ella, things don't make someone special. People do. And you? He stopped. Her eyes were watering. He hadn't meant to touch something raw in her. But it was too late. He saw the truth flickering behind her expression. She didn't feel special. She felt temporary. Replaceable. Alone. Before he could comfort her, a sudden crash sounded from upstairs, sharp and unexpected. Ella yelped. Charles snapped his head upward. That noise, it wasn't normal. Almost like a door slamming, hard. Stay here, he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. She nodded quickly, clutching her sleeves. He moved up the staircase in long strides, the air growing tighter the closer he got to his office. Another soft thud. He twisted the doorknob. The office was dim, curtains partly drawn, but he saw it immediately. His desk drawer was open. Papers scattered. And the safe behind his bookshelf had been shifted, slightly ajar as if someone had tried to access it. His pulse quickened. Nothing appeared stolen, but someone had definitely been in here. He scanned the room, jaw tightening. Another twist. Someone had been searching for something, or trying to take something. He stepped backward, closing the door behind him. But when he turned, he saw Ella peeking nervously from the bottom of the staircase. I heard something else, she whispered. Are you okay? He nodded, forcing calm. Everything's fine. Just a loose drawer. But she didn't look convinced. He didn't want to scare her. He didn't want her to think danger followed her here. She looked small again, frightened and uncertain. And he realized something. She wasn't the only one struggling with ghosts. Ella, he said gently, how about we make breakfast? Something simple. Pancakes maybe? Her eyes widened. I've only had real pancakes once. At a church event. They tasted like heaven. A crack of warmth touched him. Then let's try to recreate heaven. A faint smile tugged at her mouth. Okay. They stepped into the kitchen together. The morning sunlight filtered through the large windows, turning everything gold. Ella hopped onto a stool, swinging her feet as he searched for ingredients. The tension lifted, slowly, carefully, like a page turning. They mixed batter, spilled flour, and nearly burned the first batch. Ella giggled for the first time since arriving at his home, and the sound startled him in the best way. She laughed like someone rediscovering joy. And for the first time in years, he felt it too. But as they sat down with steaming pancakes, Charles couldn't forget the open safe, or the drawers, or the lingering scent of cologne that didn't belong to him. Someone had been in his office, and he had an unsettling suspicion that it wasn't a stranger. It was someone he knew. Someone who shouldn't have been anywhere near his private files. When Ella reached for the syrup with a shy smile, he forced himself to focus on her. Because she deserved peace. But behind his calm expression, Charles felt something else rising. Suspicion. And the cold, creeping sense that his life was about to unravel in ways he never saw coming. The next morning arrived quietly, the kind of soft sunrise that filtered through curtains like a gentle invitation. Jacob stood in the kitchen of his Manhattan townhouse, staring at the untouched lukewarm coffee on the counter. Sleep had been a losing battle. His thoughts had circled endlessly. Amara, her mother's collapse, the hospital room, the way Amara held her mom's hand as if letting go would break the universe. He had dropped Amara off at the hospital last night, promising he'd return in the morning. He didn't know why the promise left his mouth so naturally, it just did. Something about this child, this little girl who'd stood alone at a bus terminal carrying responsibilities too heavy for her age, had awakened something inside him he thought he buried years ago. Now standing in his kitchen, his phone buzzed. A message from the hospital. Patient stable. Child requested your presence. He stared at the screen. Requested. Amara wanted him there. His jaw tightened, not out of stress, but out of a strange protectiveness he couldn't quite understand yet. Before he could analyze it, he grabbed his coat and headed out the door. The hospital hallways were quiet when he arrived. A nurse greeted him with a warm nod as if she already knew who he was. She guided him through the corridor and stopped outside a private room. She's in there, the nurse said softly. She asked for you 3 times. Something in Jacob's chest shifted. When he stepped inside, Amara was sitting by her mother's bedside, small legs dangling off the chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap like she was preparing for a serious discussion. Her mother looked weak but slightly improved, eyes open, breathing steadier. Amara turned when she heard him. Her face lit up, not with excitement but with relief. As if he'd kept a promise she wasn't sure he'd remember. "Hi," she whispered. "Morning," Jacob said gently. Amara stood and walked toward him with that mix of shyness and bravery he was starting to recognize. "Thank you for coming." "Of course I came." He smiled at her. "How's your mom?" She glanced back at the bed. "She's better today, a little." The woman in the bed managed a faint smile. "Jacob, thank you, for everything." "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "Just focus on getting stronger." A soft silence settled. Amara kept twisting her fingers as if wrestling with something she wanted to say. Her foot tapped nervously against the tiled floor. Jacob lowered himself into a chair, watching her closely. "Amara, is something wrong?" She froze. Her eyes darted to her mother, then down to the floor, then back to him. The conflict inside her was visible, like she was trying to choose between fear and necessity. Her mother spoke first, her voice cracking. "Sweetheart, it's okay. If you feel it in your heart, say it." Amara swallowed hard. She took one step closer to Jacob, then another. And finally she stopped right in front of him, her small hands trembling. "Mr. Jacob," she whispered, Can I ask you something? Something really important." "Anything," he said, leaning in. She took a shaky breath. "Next week," her voice wavered. "Next week is the father-daughter dance at school." Jacob's heartbeat slowed. She continued, her voice barely holding steady. "I haven't gone in 3 years, Because I never had someone to take me." Her mother covered her mouth, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Jacob felt the air thin. Amara looked right into his eyes. "Would you?" Her lips quivered. She blinked tears away. "Would you go with me?" The question broke through him like sudden thunder. He hadn't expected it, not like this, not so soon, not with such raw honesty. The courage it must have taken for her to ask, the fear that he might say no, the way her voice trembled on that final word. His breath caught in his throat. He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped when he saw the fear in her eyes. The fear of rejection. The fear of hoping for too much. He wanted to say yes immediately. His instinct screamed yes. But this wasn't a simple request. This was a child asking for more than a dance. She was asking for a moment she'd never forget, a moment she'd hold on to forever. He needed to be sure. For her mother, for himself. "Amara," he said softly, "can we talk about it with your mom first?" She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "Okay, yes, that's fine." They both turned toward her mother. But her mother wasn't looking at them. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing had changed, slower, more strained. Amara's panic erupted instantly. "Mom? Mom?" She rushed to her bedside. "Mom, wake up, please wake up." Jacob stood so fast the chair almost toppled. He pressed the call button for the nurse. 2 nurses rushed in within seconds. "What's happening?" Amara cried, voice cracking. The nurses gently but urgently checked her vitals. "She's okay," one assured them quickly. Her blood pressure dropped again. "This is normal for her condition. She just needs a moment." Amara grasped her mother's hand tightly, tears dripping onto the sheets. Jacob stood behind her, helpless, heart pounding. After a tense few minutes that felt like hours, her mother slowly opened her eyes again. Amara breathed out a shuddering sigh of relief and rested her forehead on her mother's arm. Jacob's fists had curled at his sides. This child had been living like this, every day wondering if her mother might not wake up. No child should carry that fear. When her mother gathered enough strength, she turned her head toward Jacob. "She wants you to be the one," she whispered. "If you feel it in your spirit, please don't say no." Jacob nodded slowly. He knelt beside Amara again. "Look at me," he said gently. She lifted her head, cheeks wet, eyes frightened. "I would be honored," he said, voice strong and sure, "to take you to your father-daughter dance." Amara gasped, covering her mouth. Her mother closed her eyes in gratitude. But before the relief could fully settle, before Amara could even smile, the hospital door swung open. A man in a dark jacket stepped inside. A man neither of them recognized. He held a folder. A serious expression. An air of authority. "Are you the ones traveling with the patient?" he asked sharply. Jacob stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man pulled out an ID. "Social services." Amara's face drained of color. Her mother's hand slipped weakly off the blanket. The man's next words hit like a hammer. "We need to discuss the child's custody situation, immediately." The room fell silent, so silent that the beeping monitor by the bed suddenly felt too loud, too sharp. Amara clutched the side of her mother's blanket, her small fingers trembling. Jacob's entire body tensed. The presence of the man standing in the doorway carried an energy that instantly shifted the air. Authority mixed with something else, urgency maybe, concern, or trouble. The man stepped inside, closing the door carefully behind him as though preparing for a difficult conversation. "My name is Daniel Harrow," he said, holding up his badge again. "Child Protection Services, New York State." Amara's breath hitched. Her mother's eyes widened, fear washing over her exhausted features. Jacob stepped forward. "What's the issue? Why are you here?" Daniel opened the folder in his hand. A report was filed regarding the condition of the child's primary caregiver, Ms. Davis. He glanced at Amara's mother. "Ma'am, we received notice that you collapsed at a bus terminal yesterday." Her mother swallowed hard. "I'm just tired. I've been sick for a while, but—" He cut her off gently but firmly. "We're also aware you were traveling across states without stable housing, without consistent medical support, and with a minor under your care. His eyes softened slightly. This situation raises serious concerns. Amara stepped in front of her mother instinctively. Don't take me away. Please don't take me away. My mom is getting better. She just needs rest. Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel sighed. It wasn't the sigh of someone cold, but someone used to hearing this kind of plea far too often. No one is taking you anywhere yet, he said carefully. But we do need to understand what's happening so we can ensure your safety. Jacob's jaw flexed. He moved closer to Amara, standing protectively between her and the man. She's safe, Jacob said, voice steady. I've been with them since the incident. They're not alone. Daniel looked at him, measuring him. And you are? A friend, Jacob answered before thinking. Someone who helped when they needed it. Daniel flipped a page in the folder. Mr. Jacob Whitmore. The name landed with a soft yet unmistakable weight. Recognition flickered in Daniel's eyes. Whitmore, as in Whitmore Industries? Jacob didn't react. He simply said, let's focus on them. Daniel nodded slowly, shutting the folder. All right. Ms. Davis, I need to ask you some questions. Her mother struggled to sit up. Her body was too weak, but she tried anyway, driven by fear more than strength. I take care of my daughter. She's my whole world. I believe that, Daniel said gently. But I need to know where you were headed when you collapsed. Amara tugged her mother's sleeve. Mom, you don't have to. Her mother squeezed her hand. It's okay, sweetheart. She took a shaky breath, then looked at Daniel. We were going to Charlotte. Her voice broke. My sister lives there. I was hoping she could help with my health and with Amara. Daniel wrote something down. Do you have confirmation from your sister that she was expecting you? A painful silence filled the room. Her mother's eyes dropped to the blanket. No. I didn't tell her yet. I didn't want to worry her. Daniel closed his pen. That single detail weighed heavily. No stable plan, no confirmed support, no medical structure. Jacob saw it too. The path this was going down. Daniel continued carefully. Ma'am, your daughter loves you. That's clear. But your health is unstable and you're traveling without resources. Right now we have two priorities, your recovery and her stability. Amara burst out, I am stable. I take care of my mom. I know what to do. I give her medicine and water and... Daniel held up a hand. Amara, I hear you. But you shouldn't have to be the one taking care of a sick adult. You're a child. I don't want to be anywhere else, she whispered, voice shaking. Jacob felt helpless, angry, protective, all at once. Daniel turned to him. Mr. Whitmore, how long have you known them? Jacob's mind raced. If he said 1 day, it would only make things worse. But he refused to lie. Not long, he admitted. But I didn't walk away. I won't. Daniel studied him again. Your involvement complicates things. How? Jacob challenged. Because you're not family, Daniel replied. And stepping in to help a vulnerable child places responsibility on you, legal responsibility. You need to understand what that means. Jacob held Daniel's stare. I understand more than you think. The tension in the room rose like heat. Meanwhile, Amara leaned against her mother's side, tears silently sliding down her cheeks. Her mother brushed a braid away from her face with hands that trembled. Please, her mother whispered, her voice thin. Don't separate us. She's all I have. Daniel closed his folder slowly. No decisions are being made today. But we do need to open an evaluation. I'll be visiting again tomorrow, possibly with a supervisor. Amara's fear spiked. Tomorrow? Daniel nodded. Yes. And I need to speak with you alone at some point. Amara clung to her mother's arm. No, please don't make me leave her. I won't take you anywhere without explanation, Daniel said softly. But I must follow procedure. Her mother's breathing grew uneven. Please, give me time. I'm getting treatment. I'll get stronger. Daniel adjusted his jacket, preparing to leave. I truly hope so. For both your sake. As he placed a card on the bedside table, he looked at Jacob once more. Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you consider the role you're stepping into. The moment you involve yourself at this level, everything changes. For her. For you. For everyone in this room. Jacob felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. He didn't respond. Daniel opened the door, paused, then said quietly, "I'll be back tomorrow morning." Then he was gone. "Because you're not family," Daniel replied. "And stepping in to help a vulnerable child places responsibility on you, legal responsibility. You need to understand what that means." Jacob held Daniel's stare. "I understand more than you think." The tension in the room rose like heat. Meanwhile, Amara leaned against her mother's side, tears silently sliding down her cheeks. Her mother brushed a braid away from her face with hands that trembled. "Please," her mother whispered, her voice thin. "Don't separate us. She's all I have." Daniel closed his folder slowly. "No decisions are being made today. But we do need to open an evaluation. I'll be visiting again tomorrow, possibly with a supervisor." Amara's fear spiked. "Tomorrow?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. And I need to speak with you alone at some point." Amara clung to her mother's arm. "No, please don't make me leave her." "I won't take you anywhere without explanation," Daniel said softly. "But I must follow procedure." Her mother's breathing grew uneven. "Please, give me time. I'm getting treatment. I'll get stronger." Daniel adjusted his jacket, preparing to leave. "I truly hope so. For both your sake." As he placed a card on the bedside table, he looked at Jacob once more. "Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you consider the role you're stepping into. The moment you involve yourself at this level, everything changes. For her. For you. For everyone in this room." Jacob felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. He didn't respond. Daniel opened the door, paused, then said quietly, "I'll be back tomorrow morning." Then he was gone. The room was still again. Too still. Amara's mother's eyes were glazed with panic. "I can't lose her," she whispered. "I can't. I can't." Jacob moved to her side immediately. "You're not losing anyone," he said firmly. "You don't know that," she cried softly. "They've tried before. When I got sick the first time, they tried." Amara turned toward Jacob, face flushed with fear. "Mr. Jacob, can he take me away?" Jacob knelt in front of her. "Not if I can help it." She blinked up at him, hope and terror wrestling in her eyes. "Promise?" she whispered. He hesitated, not because he doubted himself, but because promises to children are the most sacred kind. "Unbreakable." "I promise," he said. Her small body fell into his arms, sobbing into his chest. He held her gently, protectively, his mind already racing through 1,000 possibilities. But before he could process any of it, before he could even think of a solution, a sudden cough racked her mother's body, violent and painful. The monitor beside her began to beep rapidly. Nurses rushed in again. And Jacob felt his stomach drop as one shouted, "Her oxygen levels are crashing. Get respiratory support." Amara screamed her mother's name. Jacob stood frozen, helpless, terrified. Because if her mother didn't make it through this moment, Daniel Harrow would return tomorrow. And this time, he wouldn't be leaving without Amara. Chaos erupted in the hospital room like a sudden storm. Nurses swarmed around the bed, machines beeped in frantic patterns, and the air seemed to thicken with panic. Amara clung to Jacob's arm, shaking so hard he could feel her trembling through his coat. Her mother's breaths came in short, desperate bursts as the medical team lowered an oxygen mask over her face. "Mom?" Amara cried, trying to run toward the bed. A nurse gently blocked her. "Sweetheart, stay back. We're helping her." But to a child, nothing about this looked like help. It looked like losing. Jacob pulled Amara close, guiding her away from the chaos. He could barely process what he was seeing himself. Her mother's condition had always looked fragile, but this was a frightening unraveling. Her limbs curled inwards, her chest rose unevenly, her eyes flickered like a candle fighting its final moments. He swallowed hard, trying to stay steady for Amara's sake. "She's in good hands," he whispered, though even he wasn't sure. The nurse closest to the monitor adjusted several settings, her voice calm but urgent. We need respiratory therapy now. Page them stat. Amara's panic grew with each second. Is she dying? Please tell me she's not dying. Jacob knelt beside her, putting both hands on her shoulders. Look at me, Amara. Look right at me. She lifted her tear-filled eyes. Your mother is fighting. And these doctors are trained for moments like this. But what if she loses? She sobbed. What if she doesn't wake up? His heart clenched. Children shouldn't have to ask questions like that. He pulled her into his arms again, guiding her to the hallway as the medical team continued working. She buried her face into his coat, gripping him like he was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. After several minutes that felt like hours, a doctor stepped out of the room. A woman in a navy coat, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her expression was serious but not hopeless. Are you with them? She asked. Jacob nodded, though the word with felt too small, too weak to describe the bond forming between him and this child. Yes. She crouched to Amara's level. Sweetheart, your mom is very sick. But we stabilized her for now. She's resting again. For now. Amara repeated, voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated. A moment too long. Can I see her? Amara begged. Not yet, the doctor said gently. She needs time to recover from the episode. Amara's face crumpled. But what if it happens again? What if she... Jacob placed an arm around her, grounding her. The doctor continued softly, we're running more tests today. Her condition is more serious than we originally thought. Jacob asked, what does that mean exactly? The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Her organs are failing from prolonged untreated illness. She's been pushing her body far beyond its limits. And the stress of travel made everything worse. Amara gripped Jacob's hand tighter. The doctor added, we need to keep her here as long as possible. But her path forward, she paused, choosing careful words. It will be difficult. Amara's breath caught. Is she going to die? The doctor's eyes softened. We're doing everything we can. Those 6 words said everything without saying it. The doctor stood, offering Jacob a business card. We'll update you soon. Try to keep her calm. Calm? How does a child stay calm while standing inches away from the possibility of losing the only constant in her world? When the doctor returned inside, Jacob guided Amara to a nearby waiting area. The hallway echoed with distant chatter, rolling carts, and faint overhead announcements, but around them, everything felt painfully still. Amara sat down slowly, hugging her backpack to her chest. Jacob sat beside her. Her voice came out broken. If she dies, where do I go? He froze. The question struck him like a blow he didn't see coming. No one wants me, she whispered, staring at the floor. That's why we moved so much. Nobody ever wanted to help. And my aunt, she doesn't even know we were coming. Amara, Jacob said gently, you're not going to be alone. Her eyes lifted to his, filled with heartbreak. But social services is going to come back. They'll take me. They always take kids like me. A lump formed in Jacob's throat. I won't let them take you somewhere unsafe. But you can't stop them, she said, voice trembling. They take kids away from parents who are sick, even if the parents love them. Her words revealed a truth Jacob hadn't known. This wasn't the first time she'd faced this fear. Maybe not the first time social services had been involved. Maybe not the first time she'd watched her mother struggle to keep her. He leaned forward, trying to stay calm. Tell me something, Amara. Has someone tried to take you before? She nodded slowly. Twice. When I was 6, and again when I was 7. Because Mom didn't have enough money and she kept getting sick. She sucked in a shaky breath. We moved so they wouldn't find us. The revelation hit Jacob hard. They hadn't been traveling out of hope. They'd been traveling out of fear. Amara wiped her face with her sleeve. And now Mr. Daniel is going to take me too. Jacob exhaled, collecting himself before speaking. Amara listened carefully. I won't let anyone take you without a fight. And when I give my word, I don't break it. Something in his tone must have reached her, because her shoulders relaxed just a little. She nodded and leaned against him again, exhausted. A nurse approached. She can see her mom now. Only for a minute. Amara jumped up, then hesitated. Will you come with me? Jacob stood. Of course. When they entered the room again, her mother lay quiet, breathing slow, the oxygen mask still in place. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard footsteps. Amara rushed to her side, holding her hand. Mom, you scared me. Her mother touched her cheek weakly. I'm still here, baby. Jacob stood near the foot of the bed, watching silently. Her mother looked at him, her gaze heavy with understanding, as if she knew something he didn't want to admit yet. Jacob, she whispered through the mask, you need to hear something. He stepped closer. Her voice was faint, barely audible. If something happens to me, she paused to catch her breath. Please don't let them take her. Amara's grip tightened around her mother's hand. Mom, don't talk like that. Her mother continued, she's a good girl. She just needs someone who doesn't leave. Her words sliced through the room. Then she looked directly at Jacob, into him, through him, seeing something he normally hid behind walls of accomplishment and distance. You're the first person in a long time who didn't walk away. Jacob's heart clenched. Amara rested her head on her mother's arm, whispering, You're not going anywhere, right? Her mother gave a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. And Jacob felt it, an unspoken truth settling in the air. She didn't know how much longer she had. Before he could respond, a knock sounded on the door frame. Everyone turned. Standing there was a tall woman in a charcoal suit, holding her own folder, her badge clipped to her belt. Daniel Harrow wasn't alone this time. His supervisor had arrived, early. And the look on her face told Jacob this wasn't just a check-in. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Something that might change Amara's fate forever. The evening air in downtown Seattle was cooler than usual, the type that carried a soft bite even through a tailored coat. Greg stepped out of the town car and stood for a moment in front of the Four Seasons Hotel, where a charity gala was already in full swing. The glass walls shimmered with reflections of evening lights, and the steady stream of guests moved inside with confident steps. The usual comfort of these high-profile events felt distant from him tonight. He checked his watch. He was early, something he rarely ever was. But he had needed the quiet ride to think, to settle the unease that had been pulsing beneath his calm exterior all day. Since meeting Janelle and her daughter, Serenity, something in him had shifted. And now he couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be a turning point. The doorman greeted him with a polite nod, and Greg returned the gesture before walking through the towering glass doors. Warm light spilled across marble floors, and classical music floated through the air like a soft current. Wealthy donors mingled across the expansive ballroom, laughter and clinking glasses creating a practiced symphony. Greg was used to this world, this environment of polished elegance, curated charm, and quiet deals whispered behind champagne flutes. Yet, since crossing paths with Serenity, the vibrancy of these rooms felt muted. Everything here suddenly felt hollow. As he stepped inside, several board members and investors approached him with greetings, shaking his hand, thanking him for attending. He responded politely, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself glancing toward the ballroom entrance more than once, hoping, though he wasn't sure for what. He collected a drink from a passing server but didn't take a sip. Instead, he stood near a tall window overlooking the shimmering water of Elliott Bay, the city lights reflecting like stars caught on the surface. Usually this view gave him clarity. Tonight, his thoughts kept drifting back to the small girl with the trembling hands and brave smile. Serenity. 8 years old, trying so hard to stay composed while holding a cardboard sign. Need a dad for the father-daughter dance. The words were etched into his mind more sharply than anything discussed in the boardroom that morning. The memory made his chest tighten. He still wasn't fully sure why it hit him so deeply. Maybe because Serenity reminded him of the childhood he lost. Maybe because her quiet courage felt too familiar. Or maybe because her situation illuminated a truth he'd been avoiding for years, that for all his wealth, there was a wide, unhealed space inside him. A familiar voice pulled him back to the present. Greg? Earth to Greg. He turned. Standing beside him was Jordan Myers, his longtime financial partner. Jordan was a tall man with a sharp jawline and a reputation for charming donors with impossibly smooth confidence. "You look unusually thoughtful tonight," Jordan remarked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Everything all right?" Greg offered a polite half-smile. "Just thinking." "Dangerous," Jordan teased. Then, lowering his voice, he added, "Did you see the guest list? Great opportunities tonight. 3 venture groups from Toronto are here. Big ones." Greg nodded without much enthusiasm. Jordan continued, "We can expand the West Coast development project faster if..." But Greg tuned out. Deals and expansion suddenly felt trivial. He didn't want to talk about profits or property development or percentages. "Not tonight." "Jordan," Greg interrupted gently, "I'll catch up with you in a bit." Jordan blinked in mild surprise. "Oh, yeah. Sure." Greg walked away and headed toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, where a small display of photographs showcased the charity's work, educational programs, scholarship recipients, restored community centers, and rescue operations. As he skimmed the images, a group of students smiling in their graduation gowns made his steps slow. He understood something then, standing in front of that display. Helping Serenity had opened a door in him he didn't know was closed. But before he could reflect further, a sudden wave of conversation rippled through the ballroom. Heads turned toward the entrance. Greg followed their gaze and froze. Janelle walked inside. She wore a simple navy blue dress, nothing extravagant, but she managed to outshine half the women in the room with her natural grace. Her hair was softly curled, falling around her shoulders. She looked nervous, slightly out of place, but steady. She clutched her small purse tightly with both hands, as if reminding herself she belonged here, even if she didn't fully believe it. What was she doing here? Greg felt an unexpected warmth rush through him, mixed with confusion. He hadn't invited her. The event wasn't exactly the kind of place people just stumbled into. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, dressed in a little white dress with tiny silver shoes, was Serenity. The girl scanned the room with wide eyes, trying to take in everything at once. When her gaze landed on him, her entire face lit up. "Mr. Greg," she called out, loud enough for several guests to turn. Greg's heart nearly dropped. He didn't care about the attention, but he could see the nerves in Janelle's eyes as the crowd momentarily stared. He crossed the room quickly, meeting them halfway. "Hey," he said softly, crouching a little as Serenity rushed toward him. "What are you both doing here?" Janelle's cheeks were flushed. "I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to interrupt anything. I actually didn't know you'd be here." "You didn't?" Greg asked, genuinely puzzled. She shook her head, embarrassed. "I found an online listing for free community events open to local families. This one said it had a space for kids to enjoy music and activities while parents networked. I thought maybe it would be good for Serenity to see something different." Greg blinked. The event organizers had opened certain parts of the gala to the public for the first time this year. It was supposed to be an outreach effort, but he hadn't realized those areas were connected to the main entrance. "It's completely okay," he reassured her. "You're welcome here." Serenity tugged on his sleeve. "This place is fancy. Like super fancy." Greg smiled. "Yeah, it's a little extra." When Serenity giggled, the sound felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy morning. But the warm moment didn't last long. Jordan appeared behind Greg, his expression tight. "Greg, can we talk? Privately?" Greg sensed the tension immediately. Jordan wasn't smiling. His jaw was set, and his gaze flicked briefly toward Janelle and Serenity with thinly veiled disapproval. Before Greg could respond, Jordan leaned in slightly and whispered, "You're being watched. And not by the press. Some board members are concerned about appearances." Greg's stomach tightened. He knew exactly what that meant. He stood up straight, his expression cooling. "Jordan, I'll come find you later." Jordan didn't move. "Greg, this is serious." "I said later." Jordan hesitated, then walked off stiffly. Janelle watched the exchange with concern. "We don't want to cause trouble for you. If we should go." "No," Greg said quickly. "You're not causing trouble. Not for me." But the weight in his chest grew heavier. The room felt different now. Colder. Eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Whispers traveled just beneath the music. Serenity, oblivious, twirled in her little dress, admiring the chandeliers overhead. "Mr. Gregg," she asked brightly, "will you show us around?" He hesitated, only for a second, but Serenity's hopeful smile dissolved every doubt. "Of course." He offered his arm to Janelle. She looked startled, then slowly accepted. Serenity grabbed his other hand, and the three of them walked deeper into the gala. For a moment it felt right, natural. But with every step, Gregg could feel the pressure mounting. Questions, judgments. His world and theirs colliding in a way that would not stay quiet for long. And somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a woman lifted her phone, discreetly recording them. Gregg didn't notice. Janelle didn't notice. Serenity didn't notice. But the recording would change everything. Gregg had attended hundreds of galas in his lifetime. Fundraisers in New York, penthouses, political dinners in Los Angeles, investment events in Toronto. He knew every social rhythm, every hidden pressure, every polished smile concealing an agenda. But walking into the main ballroom hand in hand with Janelle and Serenity felt like stepping into a fire he didn't know was burning until he was already in the center of it. The first spark of discomfort came when an older couple paused mid-conversation as he passed. Their polite smiles froze. Their eyes flicked downward, first at Serenity's little white dress and then at Janelle's modest shoes, and then returned to Gregg with silent, unmistakable judgment. Gregg felt the shift. He'd lived long enough in this world to recognize when people were drawing conclusions without asking a single question. Still, he tightened his hold on Serenity's hand and guided her toward the section with exhibits, photos, and interactive displays set up by the charity team. Children from the public area drifted in and out, but very few families had accidentally made their way into the private donor section the way Janelle and Serenity had. "This screen shows how they built a whole science center," Serenity said, pointing excitedly at a large digital panel showing community projects. "Look, Mom." Kids painted the walls. Janelle smiled softly and brushed her daughter's shoulder. "You see? People really do come together for good things." Gregg's chest warmed at the sight. He had built companies, funded institutions, and donated millions, but watching Serenity's genuine excitement made all of it feel more personal than it ever had. But it didn't last long. A woman dressed in a silver gown stepped closer, pretending to admire the same display. Gregg knew her, Victoria Hale, one of the board's longest-standing members. Sharp-tongued, influential, a queen in rooms like this. She leaned slightly toward Gregg with a poised smile. "Well, Gregg darling, you certainly know how to make an entrance." His jaw tightened. "Good evening, Victoria." Her gaze drifted to Janelle, then to Serenity, who was too absorbed in the animated screen to notice the scrutiny. "And who," Victoria asked lightly, "might your guests be?" There was nothing innocent about the question. The underlying tone made it clear, she wasn't asking out of curiosity, she was assessing. Gregg answered evenly. "Friends." Victoria's eyebrows lifted almost imperceptibly. "How lovely." Janelle instinctively shifted closer to Serenity, trying to keep her posture composed even as discomfort washed across her features. Victoria added, her voice dipped in sugar and steel, "I suppose the event being open this year has certainly encouraged a broad range of attendees." Gregg's temper flashed. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Serenity tugged his sleeve. "Mr. Gregg, can I show you something?" she asked, eyes shining. He swallowed the anger and forced a calm tone. "I'd love to." Victoria smiled thinly, as if she'd already made up her mind about everything she'd seen, and drifted away in a cloud of silver fabric and silent judgment. Gregg exhaled slowly. Janelle whispered, "We shouldn't stay. This is your world, not ours." "No," Gregg said firmly, looking directly at her. "This room belongs to anyone trying to make a difference. You and Serenity are exactly the kind of people these events should welcome." His honesty caught her off guard. They held each other's gaze for a moment longer than expected, something unspoken circling between them. But the fragile peace shattered when someone across the room let out a startled exclamation. Gregg turned and saw Jordan. And he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man with a press badge around his neck and a camera slung over his shoulder. A journalist. Jordan's expression was a mixture of frustration and fear. He kept glancing between Greg and the reporter, clearly wishing he could rewind the night. "Greg," Jordan called, motioning him over. "We need to talk." Greg stepped forward, keeping his composure. "What is this?" Jordan lowered his voice. "The reporter saw someone recording you earlier. Word spreading around the room that you brought, well, that you arrived with." "Friends?" Greg said sharply. Jordan rubbed his forehead. "Look, man, I know you mean well. I'm not saying it's wrong. But people are talking. And that video, once it gets out." "What video?" Janelle asked, stepping forward. Jordan looked torn but answered, "Someone filmed you three when you walked in. It's already being passed around on donor group chats. Now the press thinks there's a story." Serenity blinked innocently. "A story about what?" Greg's jaw hardened. "Nothing. There is no story." But Jordan wasn't finished. He swallowed hard, then added, "Greg, your company's major deal with the Azure Bay investors, it's hanging by a thread. They're extremely sensitive to public optics right now. And if they think—" Greg's voice snapped. "If they think what?" Jordan hesitated. "If they think you're mixing business with unnecessary exposure." There it was. The ugly truth. Wrapped in careful words but unmistakably pointed. Janelle flushed with embarrassment. Serenity looked confused. "Did we do something bad?" "No," Greg said instantly. "You did absolutely nothing wrong." But the room suddenly felt heavier, eyes turning toward them, whispers spreading like wildfire. Greg straightened, protective instinct rising like a wave in him. "Jordan," he said quietly but firmly, "my personal life isn't an asset to negotiate." Jordan exhaled shakily. "I know. But this is bigger than personal. Investors panic easily. A single rumor can." "We're leaving," Janelle whispered, barely audible. Greg turned to her. "You don't have to." "No," she said, forcing a fragile smile. "We do." Before Greg could protest, Serenity slipped her small hand into her mother's and looked up at him with wide, apologetic eyes. "Thank you for showing me the pictures, Mr. Greg," she said softly. "I didn't mean to make trouble." The heartbreak of that moment hit him harder than he expected. "You didn't," Greg said, his voice thickening. "You didn't make trouble. I promise." But Janelle already had her purse in hand. Her breathing was uneven. "We shouldn't have come." "You belong here more than half the people in this room," Greg insisted. But she wasn't convinced. The humiliation, the judgmental stares, it had all become too much. She gently pulled Serenity toward the exit. Greg felt panic rise. He stepped forward, but Jordan caught his arm. "Greg, don't," he whispered urgently. "Walking out in the middle of the gala? With them? Cameras are everywhere tonight. You'll make it worse." Greg looked from Jordan to the ballroom of whispering eyes, to the shrinking figure of Serenity holding her mother's hand. He had a choice. Stay and protect the reputation he'd spent decades building, or walk out and stand with the two people who had unknowingly rekindled a part of him he thought was dead. His pulse pounded in his ears. Then, someone shouted from the opposite end of the ballroom. "Is that him? The billionaire with the girl? Over here." A camera light flicked on, bright, blinding, aimed directly at Greg. Janelle froze. Serenity clung to her. And before Greg could move, someone stepped into the camera shot behind him. Not a reporter. Not a donor. A man Greg hadn't seen in 15 years. The sight of him made Greg's entire body go cold. And the chapter ends here. The moment Greg saw the man's face, all sound in the ballroom seemed to collapse into a dull, suffocating hum. The crystal chandeliers blurred. The chatter faded. Even the harsh glare of the camera became insignificant compared to the shock pulsing through his veins. The man standing behind him wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was the ghost, the one Greg had spent half his life trying to outrun. His name was Calvin Price, a former mentor turned adversary, a man who once guided Greg through the brutal early years of business, only to betray him during a scandal that nearly cost him everything. 12 years ago, Calvin had vanished from the corporate world after being exposed for financial misconduct. But not before framing Greg in the process, nearly destroying his credibility. And now he was here, smiling, confident, watching him with a look that said he knew exactly how much damage his presence alone could do. "Well," Calvin drawled, adjusting his suit jacket, "looks like you're still the center of attention, kid." Greg didn't move. He didn't speak. His throat had tightened too much to form a word. The camera operator turned from Greg to Calvin, sensing drama. "Sir, are you connected to Mr. Langford's?" "No comment," Calvin said with a silky grin. But it wasn't really an answer. It was bait. A spark thrown into dry leaves. Janelle stood frozen several feet away, gripping Serenity's hand tightly. Serenity looked frightened, her small body tucked close to her mother. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew something was wrong. Jordan approached cautiously, his expression confused but alarmed. "Greg, what is he doing here?" Greg finally found his voice. "I don't know. But it's not a coincidence." Calvin chuckled. "Oh, come on, don't flatter yourself. I'm just here doing what you are, supporting the cause." Greg's jaw clenched. Calvin Price did not show up to charity events. Not unless he wanted something. Not unless he had an angle. Greg stepped toward him. "Why now? After all these years?" Calvin raised an eyebrow, amused by how shaken Greg was. "You make it sound like I've been hiding under your bed." He leaned in just a fraction, voice dipping lower. "Relax, Gregory. I heard you'd be here. Thought we might reconnect." Greg felt the old anger bubbling, the anger he'd buried under years of therapy, discipline, and distance. But before he could respond, the reporter pushed between them. "Mr. Langford," he said sharply, "can you comment on being seen entering the gala with a woman and a young girl, while this man arrives just minutes later? Is there a connection between these events?" Greg whipped toward the reporter, disbelief flashing across his face. "They have nothing to do with each other. Stop involving." But the damage was already spiraling. Across the room, several donors watched with thinly veiled curiosity. Others whispered. Some held up their phones. Janelle tensed, eyes darting toward the exit. Greg knew he had to defuse this, fast. He turned to her gently. "Please, don't leave yet. Give me a second to." Her voice trembled. "This isn't our world, Greg. We're making things worse for you." "You're not," Greg insisted. "You're not the problem." But Janelle shook her head. "People are staring at us like we don't belong here. Like we're something you should hide." Hurt flickered across Serenity's face as she clung to her mother's arm. "No," Greg whispered, heart twisting. "That's not true. You're not." A sudden shout cut through the tension. "Greg!" Not Calvin. Not Jordan. Not the reporter. A third figure stepped forward, this time a woman Greg recognized instantly. Marissa Caldwell. One of the Azure Bay investors. One of the key people Greg had been negotiating with for months. Her company was ready to pour millions into his next development. Her expression was sharp, businesslike, and furious. She walked straight up to him, ignoring the cameras. "Is this what you call a quiet, professional appearance?" she hissed under her breath. "You promised us stability. No publicity. And now you're being filmed with a child holding your hand and, who is she?" Greg stiffened. "A friend." "That's not the story circulating right now," she snapped. "You're trending on 2 donor feeds already. And now press is involved? Greg, this puts everything at risk." Calvin's smile widened from a distance as if savoring the chaos. Janelle instinctively pulled Serenity closer, her eyes glistening with humiliation she tried to suppress. Greg fought to keep his composure. "Marissa, listen." "No," she cut him off. "You listen. If this mess affects investor confidence, Azure Bay will withdraw their offer. And if they pull out, the entire redevelopment project collapses." Jordan blanched. He knew the consequences. So did Greg. But even then, even while the walls of his professional life trembled, his eyes flicked to Serenity. The little girl was trembling. Her face had gone pale. Her eyes were fixed on the cameras and the strangers watching her like she was some kind of spectacle. Greg swallowed hard. I need to take care of them first, he said quietly. Marissa stared at him in disbelief. Them? Yes, Greg said firmly. Them? The conviction in his voice surprised even him. Marissa's voice lowered to a hiss. If you walk out with them, right now, you might as well kiss the deal goodbye. Greg looked at her, really looked at her, and saw nothing but conditional loyalty. Loyalty that only existed as long as he stayed polished, predictable, and profitable. He closed his eyes for a moment. A single moment. A brief pause to collect a lifetime's worth of fractured pieces. When he opened them, Serenity was looking up at him, silently pleading for safety. And the choice became painfully, unmistakably clear. Greg reached out and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Let's go, he said to Janelle. She hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, he said. I'm sure. Calvin watched with a satisfied smirk. Marissa muttered a curse under her breath. The reporter hurried forward, camera still rolling. Mr. Langford, are you leaving the event with them? Is this your official statement? Greg ignored him completely. He stepped protectively in front of Serenity, shielding her from the camera lights, and guided Janelle toward the exit. The crowd silently parted as they walked through, staring, whispering, judging. But Greg didn't look back. Not once. Not until they reached the glass doors. Just as they stepped outside into the cool night air, a black SUV parked across the street suddenly pulled forward. Its windows tinted. Its engine rumbling low. Its timing too deliberate. It slowed as it approached them. Janelle froze. Serenity squeezed Greg's hand tightly. And then, the SUV came to a full stop beside the curb. The back window lowered. And the face that appeared inside the vehicle made Janelle gasp aloud. Because it wasn't Calvin. It was someone connected to her past. Someone she never thought she'd see again. The SUV's tinted windows slid down only halfway, but it was enough for Janelle's breath to hitch in her throat. Her body went rigid as if every muscle had seized at once. Serenity, sensing the sudden fear radiating from her mom, clung tighter to Greg's arm. A man leaned forward from the shadows of the back seat, illuminated only by the faint glow of the street lamp. Troy Halden. Janelle's ex. Serenity's biological father. The man she had spent years trying to outrun. His voice slithered through the open window. Well, never thought I'd see you walking out of a five-star hotel, Janelle. Greg felt Janelle tremble beside him. Troy's smirk widened. Looks like life finally hit the jackpot for you, huh? New dress. Fancy event. And you didn't think to tell me where my daughter would be? Serenity's small voice wavered. Mom? Janelle swallowed hard. Serenity, stay close. Greg stepped in front of both of them, instinctively shielding the girl. His expression hardened, not with anger, more with controlled, deliberate protectiveness. Troy, Greg said coldly, it's late. And she clearly doesn't want to speak with you. Troy scoffed. And you are? Greg didn't answer. He didn't need to. Troy's eyes traveled over Greg's suit, his watch, the hotel behind him. He connected the dots quickly, and incorrectly. Ah, so that's it, Troy said. You found yourself a rich one. He tapped the SUV door with sarcasm. That explains all this. Janelle's face flushed with humiliation and anger. It's not like that, Troy. You shouldn't be here. Well, that's the funny thing, Troy said, leaning back as if settling into a story. See, I got a call. Someone told me I should take a little drive downtown. Said I'd find something worth seeing. Greg's stomach dropped. Someone called him? Oh, and why? Calvin's smug expression flashed through Greg's mind. It would be exactly the kind of chaos he'd stir up. Drop an explosive into someone's personal life and stand back to watch the damage unfold. Greg looked sharply across the street, scanning for Calvin. But the man was nowhere to be seen. Janelle's voice quivered. Troy, who gave you that call? Troy shrugged. Didn't say a name. Just said you were here, with some guy, and that maybe it was time I reminded you who's actually the father in this situation. Serenity's grip tightened further on Greg's sleeve. Greg stepped closer to the SUV. You don't get to intimidate her. Or her daughter. Troy narrowed his eyes. Careful. You might think you know what you're doing, but you don't know anything about our situation. I know enough, Greg replied evenly. And I know she doesn't feel safe with you here. Troy's jaw clenched. For a moment, his facade cracked. Something sharp, resentment or jealousy, flickered in his gaze. Then he smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Relax. I'm not here to start anything. He tilted his head towards Serenity. I just want to say hi to my kid. Serenity pressed herself further behind Greg. No, she whispered. I don't want to. The rejection stung Troy visibly. His smile faltered. Anger welled up, not explosive but simmering. That's great, he muttered. Real great. One day she'll know her mom kept me out of her life. Janelle's eyes flashed with pain. You kept yourself out. Before Troy could respond, headlights from an approaching vehicle washed across the street. Troy tensed, then leaned back into the SUV's shadows. He wasn't leaving out of kindness. He was leaving because he'd delivered the blow he came to land. But he paused one last time, resting his arm on the open window. Oh, and Janelle, he said, you might want to be careful. Folks have been talking, making calls. I'd hate for you and your friend to be dragged into something messy. Greg stepped closer, voice low, steady. Is that a threat? No, Troy said. Just an observation. He pointed 2 fingers at his eyes, then at Greg. A warning. A promise. A sign he wasn't done with them. Then the window slid back up. The SUV pulled away from the curb and vanished into the traffic. The street fell silent. Janelle's shoulders sagged as if the world's weight had just crashed back onto them. Greg moved to support her gently. Hey, he said softly. It's all right. But she shook her head, tears forming. It's not all right. You shouldn't be mixed up in this. Greg, this is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Serenity tugged on her mother's sleeve, eyes glossy with fear. Is he gonna take me? The question made Janelle physically flinch. No, Greg said firmly before Janelle could react. Absolutely not. You're safe. Both of you. But Janelle looked at him with a tortured expression. I can't drag you into this. You don't understand how complicated he is. How unpredictable. I don't scare easily, Greg replied. You should, she whispered. Greg's resolve hardened. He had dealt with men like Troy before, bullies who hid weakness beneath bluster. But this felt different. More personal. More dangerous. And woven into that danger was something else. Calvin's shadow. Greg could feel it. This wasn't just a coincidence. Something, or someone, had set this in motion. Janelle pulled her coat tight, shivering despite the mild night air. I think we should go home. Now. I'll take you, Greg said immediately. But she shook her head. No. It'll just make things worse if people see us leaving together with cameras everywhere. You've already risked too much tonight. Serenity's lip trembled. I don't want to leave without you, Mr. Greg. Her fragile voice shattered Greg's heart. He crouched to meet her gaze. I'm not going anywhere. I'll follow right behind you in my car. I promise. She leaned forward and hugged him, small, shaky, and sincere. Janelle blinked hard to keep from breaking. They walked together toward the taxi line at the side of the hotel. Greg stayed beside them, ignoring the lingering stares from a few gala attendees heading home. When the taxi pulled up, Greg opened the back door for them. Janelle hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Desperate. Conflicted. Grateful. Thank you, she whispered. You don't have to thank me. Serenity climbed in. Janelle followed. Greg held the door a second longer, repeating quietly, I'm right behind you. She nodded, though fear still flickered behind her eyes. The taxi pulled away into the night. Greg watched until its taillights disappeared into the distance. He stood rooted on the sidewalk, deep in thought, until a figure stepped beside him. A voice he knew far too well murmured, Well, that was dramatic. Greg stiffened. Calvin Price was standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the empty street. And the look on his face made Greg's blood run cold. Because Calvin wasn't surprised by what just happened. He was enjoying it. The street was quiet except for the faint hum of distant traffic. The gala's glow disappeared behind Greg like a fading dream, leaving only shadows and the cool bite of the November air. But the calm of the night was an illusion. Greg could feel it in his chest, in the tightening of his jaw, in the restless tapping of his fingers against the car hood. Calvin Price leaned against a lamppost a few steps away, casual and menacing at the same time. His gaze never left Greg. "You're getting too comfortable," Calvin said softly, as if speaking directly into Greg's mind. "You think this little rescue mission of yours is going unnoticed? That you can just walk out with a kid and her mother and everything will be fine?" Greg remained silent, studying Calvin carefully. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous. But tonight wasn't about him. Tonight was about Janelle. Tonight was about serenity. That was all that mattered. Calvin chuckled. A low, cruel sound. "You still don't get it, do you? It's not about them. Not really. It's about me. And you," he tapped a finger against Greg's chest just over his heart. "You have no idea how deep this game goes." Greg's blood ran cold. "You're threatening her?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Calvin shook his head, smiling wider. "Oh, not directly. Yet. I don't need to. You're doing the work for me." He gestured vaguely toward the street, toward the disappearing taillights of the taxi carrying Janelle and Serenity. "You think you're protecting them, but you've just made them targets." Greg clenched his fists. "Explain." Calvin stepped closer, the city lights casting shadows across his sharp features. "You've brought them into your world, Gregory. A world they don't belong in. And you? You think you're in control. You think your money, your influence, your connections will shield them. But the truth is, someone like me doesn't follow the rules." Greg's eyes narrowed. "So this is your plan? To scare them? To manipulate me?" Calvin's smile twisted. "Partly. But more importantly, it's to test you. To see if you're willing to risk everything for them. Because once they're truly exposed, once everyone sees what you've done, you'll realize it's too late." Greg's mind raced. He knew Calvin wasn't exaggerating. The network of cameras, the whispers from the gala, the recording, the pieces were already moving. And if they weren't careful, what started as a quiet rescue could spiral into disaster. "You enjoy this, don't you?" Greg asked quietly. "Watching me struggle?" Calvin tilted his head, feigning innocence. "No. I enjoy you struggling. It's the same lesson I tried to teach you 12 years ago. Life isn't about playing it safe. It's about survival. And tonight, survival isn't just about you." Greg's gaze hardened. "Leave them alone. I don't care what you're planning." Calvin laughed softly. "Oh, Gregory, I don't need to touch them. Just being near you is enough to stir the pot. But here's the real fun. You have no idea who else might be watching. Not just me. Not just your investors. Not just the press." Greg's stomach sank. He'd suspected Calvin had a plan, but this was bigger than he had imagined. "You're lying," Greg said firmly. Calvin shook his head. "I wish I were. The moment you stepped out with them tonight, someone noticed. And now they're interested. Very interested." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Do you want to know how many cameras caught your little escape? Or do you want to enjoy the night a little longer first?" Greg said nothing, the tension crawling under his skin like ice. Calvin leaned in closer, his voice a whisper now, almost intimate. "I'll make you a promise. By morning you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I guarantee, either you or they will pay the price for underestimating me." Then just as suddenly, Calvin straightened and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Greg standing alone on the street, heart pounding, mind racing. Greg stayed where he was for several moments, trying to process the confrontation. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization that the night was far from over. He had protected them for a few hours. He had saved Serenity from immediate danger. But Calvin's words echoed in his head, "Either you or they will pay the price." He knew he had to act fast. Waiting would only make things worse. The street felt eerily empty as he pulled out his phone and checked the route Janelle's taxi had taken. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he realized something. The GPS showed the cab slowing down unexpectedly, just past the downtown exit ramp. Nothing major, but enough to make a person pay attention. Greg didn't waste a second. He dialed Jordan, his voice low and urgent. "Jordan, I need you to track a taxi, now. There's a possibility someone's following it." There was a pause. "Greg, are you sure?" "Do it, please," Greg snapped. "Now." Greg ended the call and took a deep breath. He couldn't let panic set in. Not for Serenity. Not for Janelle. Calm, strategy, and action, those were his tools now. He started walking briskly toward the street, scanning the area for shadows, SUVs, anything unusual. The city around him seemed alive and indifferent, the glow of neon lights reflecting off wet asphalt. But for him, every flicker of movement was a potential threat. And then he saw it. A black SUV slowly cruising behind the taxi in the distance. It wasn't close enough to be immediately dangerous, but close enough to follow. The tinted windows glinted faintly in the streetlight. Greg's mind raced. Calvin hadn't made this call. Someone else was in play, someone who knew the taxi, someone who had been tipped off. And the thought that froze him in place was even worse. What if it wasn't just Calvin manipulating things from behind the scenes? What if Janelle and Serenity were being hunted by someone he didn't even know existed? The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of the city, horns, distant sirens, and the muffled laughter of people oblivious to the danger unfolding blocks away. Greg felt a cold resolve harden in his chest. He would not let anything happen to them. Not tonight. Not ever. He pulled his coat tighter, scanning for safe routes to intercept the taxi without drawing attention. Every option seemed risky, but doing nothing was not an option. And as he took his first step toward action, he realized something terrifying. The SUV behind the taxi wasn't alone. Through the windshield, he caught a glimpse of another vehicle, moving silently in parallel, almost like a shadow stalking the first. Greg's pulse quickened. The night had just shifted. What began as a protective act was now turning into a game of survival, and he had no idea how many players were already on the board. The chase had begun. The night air along the Seattle streets was crisp, carrying a faint smell of rain that had fallen hours earlier. Greg moved quickly, his eyes never leaving the dark shapes of the SUVs tailing Janelle's taxi. The city lights glimmered off wet asphalt, reflecting the chaos of the moment back at him. Every instinct screamed that this was bigger than a simple threat. It was a trap. Greg ducked into a parking garage beside the street, carefully choosing a position where he could watch the two vehicles without being seen. The taxi was a few blocks ahead now, slow and cautious, probably unaware of the attention it had attracted. The black SUV remained close behind, and a second vehicle, barely visible in the shadows, followed at a discreet distance. Whoever was orchestrating this had planned it meticulously. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady his racing heart. Serenity's small face flashed in his mind, and he felt an almost physical pull toward protecting her. Tonight nothing else mattered. Not Calvin, not investors, not gala appearances. Only them. Greg pulled out his phone and called Jordan. His voice was tense but controlled. "Jordan, I need you on the phones. Find any information on the people following that cab. I don't care how, traffic cams, GPS, anything. I need names now." There was a pause. "Greg, are you sure you want to involve me?" "This sounds dangerous," Jordan replied. "I don't care. Just do it," Greg snapped. "They're my priority." He hung up and leaned against a concrete pillar, scanning the garage entrance. A feeling of unease crawled up his spine. It wasn't just the presence of the vehicles, it was how deliberate their movements were. Someone knew exactly where Janelle and Serenity were, and it wasn't just Calvin. Greg needed to intercept the taxi before the shadows could close in. But approaching openly on foot would draw attention, and a high-speed chase could end badly for the girl. He thought fast, calculating risks, and spotted an exit ramp leading back to the main highway. Perfect. He moved quickly, exiting the garage and blending into the sparse nighttime traffic. His steps were precise, calculated, and silent enough not to draw attention from the first SUV. He wasn't just moving blindly, he had a plan. Minutes later, the taxi slowed as it merged onto the highway. Greg followed at a safe distance, keeping the SUVs in sight. One was still close behind, the other lurking a few hundred feet back. Then, a sudden flicker of movement in his peripheral vision made him freeze. A figure stepped out from a side street ahead, waving frantically. A man. Greg's mind raced. Could it be a Good Samaritan? Or another player in Calvin's game? The man shouted something, pointing at the taxi. Greg slowed but stayed hidden. His pulse quickened. The taxi in front of him swerved slightly in response, obviously reacting to the figure, and the black SUV behind it braked, just enough to stay close. Greg realized then that the man wasn't trying to help. They were testing him, watching to see if he would make a move. Whoever was orchestrating this wanted to see how far he would go to protect Janelle and Serenity. And they weren't going to stop until they broke him. Greg's jaw tightened. He couldn't wait any longer. It was time to take control. He moved closer, taking the next exit ramp to get parallel with the taxi, hoping to intercept them safely. As he navigated the highway, a thought hit him, something he hadn't considered fully until now. What if Calvin had coordinated this with someone from Janelle's past? Someone who knew her movements, her habits, her weaknesses? The idea chilled him. It would explain how Troy had shown up so easily tonight, how the SUV seemed perfectly placed, and why the taxi had slowed at just the right moment. Greg's mind worked furiously, piecing together every interaction from the evening. The gala, the cameras, the whispers, the unexpected appearances. It all formed a pattern. He was being herded. Greg adjusted his strategy. He needed to shake the tailing vehicles without putting the taxi at risk. Taking the next bridge exit would allow him to cut across a secondary route and potentially intercept them safely from the front. He accelerated, merging onto the exit ramp. The black SUV followed, but the second vehicle seemed hesitant, sticking to the main road. Good. That split their attention. Greg's heart pounded. He was close now. The taxi was ahead, Serenity and Janelle inside, unaware of the dangers surrounding them. Suddenly his phone buzzed. Jordan's voice came over the speaker, urgent and low. Greg, you need to listen, there's something you need to know. The vehicle behind you, it's not just one of Calvin's guys. There's someone else involved, someone tied to your family's past. They're monitoring you, your moves. You're walking into a trap if you keep going this way. Greg's blood ran cold. He had suspected Calvin alone couldn't have orchestrated this level of precision. Now he knew there was a second layer he hadn't anticipated. He cursed under his breath. Jordan. I need every exit route, every nearby overpass, every traffic cam we can access. I'm not letting them get to her. There was static on the line. Understood. Be careful, Greg. This isn't just a simple follow anymore. It's... Click. The call ended abruptly. Greg's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The cab ahead was still in sight. The black SUV behind it maintained its distance. But now he had to account for another unknown variable. And then it happened. A vehicle, moving fast, almost too fast to be real, cut across the highway from a side street, forcing both the taxi and the black SUV to swerve slightly. The second hidden vehicle appeared, trailing in the chaos. Greg swore under his breath. Whoever was orchestrating this had anticipated every move he could make. He adjusted, taking a risky maneuver to get in front of the taxi. The streets were wet from the earlier rain, and the tires screamed against the asphalt, but he needed to protect them. The taxi slowed as Janelle recognized him in the side mirror, confusion flashing across her face. Greg shouted, "Follow my lead. Stay calm. I'll get you out of this." Serenity pressed herself against Janelle, her small hands trembling. Janelle nodded, gripping the wheel tightly, trusting him despite the chaos around them. Greg's heart pounded. The SUVs behind weren't backing down. The shadow vehicle still followed, keeping the pressure on. Every instinct screamed to move fast, but he had to protect them. And as he maneuvered to guide the taxi through a safer back road, a new thought struck him like a punch. Calvin hadn't made this move tonight. Someone else had. And they knew exactly where to hit. Greg's pulse surged. Whoever it was, they were close. Too close. He swallowed hard, focusing on the road ahead. Every turn, every lane change, every subtle maneuver counted. And then, in the corner of his eye, a dark silhouette moved across the highway median. It was a person. standing, watching, waiting. Greg's stomach dropped. He had seen enough games in his life to know one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The streets of Seattle blurred past as Greg's car weaved through the dimly lit back roads, the taxi carrying Janelle and Serenity a short distance ahead. His pulse thundered in his ears, every nerve alert. He knew the shadows following them weren't random. They were calculated, precise, and relentless. Whoever was orchestrating this had orchestrated chaos like a master composer, and now Greg had to navigate the notes without letting anyone get hurt. The black SUV remained close behind the taxi, but the second shadow vehicle stayed just far enough to be ominous, invisible yet threatening. It was the kind of pursuit that had been designed to test his reactions, to pressure him into mistakes. Greg clenched his jaw. No mistakes. Not tonight. He glanced in his rearview mirror and saw a fleeting reflection of the man on the median, the silhouette from before. Greg couldn't tell if the figure was signaling, warning, or simply enjoying the chaos. One thing was certain. Whoever that person was, they were tied to the plan. Jordan's voice crackled in his earpiece. Greg, I've got the traffic cams feeding now. The black SUV isn't alone. Someone's transmitting live coordinates from a drone. They're monitoring every move you make. Greg cursed under his breath. Drones? He adjusted the wheel sharply. Who the hell has drones at 2 a.m.? And how many more surprises are waiting for me tonight? Calvin's not the only one, Jordan replied. There's someone else. Someone you've dealt with in the past. Maybe thought you'd left behind. They're collaborating. I'm tracking the second SUV. It's suspiciously familiar. Greg's mind raced. The pieces were falling into a pattern he had hoped never to see again. The past he had tried to bury was clawing its way into the present, dragging Janelle and Serenity right into the center of it. He caught a glimpse of Janelle in the taxi ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Serenity's small face pressed against the glass, wide-eyed and terrified. Greg's chest tightened. He couldn't let the past define this night. He couldn't let it reach them. He adjusted his approach, planning to intercept the taxi at a less exposed area, a narrow industrial side street that offered fewer exit options for the shadow vehicles. He knew the risks: fewer people, less visibility, but greater control. The taxi signaled and turned, and Greg followed, his own car hugging the curves of the side road. The black SUV slowed slightly, and the second vehicle maintained its distance, cautious. Whoever was orchestrating this knew Greg's skill level. They were testing, probing, waiting for a slip. Greg's mind flashed to Calvin Price, the man who had started this chain of events. Calvin thrived on chaos, on fear, on manipulation. But Calvin alone wasn't enough. The appearance of Troy, the shadow vehicles, the figure on the median, all of it pointed to someone else. Someone personal. Greg's heart sank as he realized the implications. Janelle and Serenity weren't just being watched, they were being hunted. And the hunter knew their routines, their fears, their vulnerabilities. He reached the industrial street, a narrow lane bordered by old warehouses and flickering street lamps. Perfect. Minimal traffic, minimal witnesses, and plenty of room to maneuver. He slowed, signaling subtly to the taxi ahead. Janelle glanced back, confusion flickering across her face. Trust me, Greg said firmly through the earpiece, keeping his tone calm. Stay on this route. Don't speed. Let me guide you. She nodded, hands tightening on the wheel. Serenity's grip on her mother's arm was unyielding, but Greg could hear her soft whisper, I'm scared, Mr. Greg. I know, Greg whispered back, but I won't let anything happen to you. The black SUV followed closely, but Greg's maneuvering forced them into a position where they couldn't easily overtake or corner the taxi. The second shadow vehicle remained distant, observing, analyzing. Someone with experience. Someone patient. And then, without warning, the first SUV swerved sharply, attempting to cut off the taxi. Greg reacted instantly, cutting his car between them and the taxi. Tires screeched. The vehicles danced like predators and prey under the dim streetlights. Hang on, Greg shouted. Janelle's knuckles whitened on the wheel, and Serenity's small voice trembled. But they trusted him. And that trust gave him strength. The black SUV attempted another maneuver, but Greg anticipated it, forcing the vehicle into a brief skid. The second shadow vehicle closed in slightly, its purpose clear: coordinate, intimidate, and trap. Greg's mind raced, analyzing options, trying to anticipate the next move. He had to separate the taxi from the threats, had to guide Janelle and Serenity to safety before the hunters could escalate. And then, as he guided them past a dimly lit intersection, he saw movement ahead, a figure stepping onto the street. Greg slammed the brakes, bringing his car to a near halt. The taxi ahead followed instinctively. The figure moved quickly, darting between shadows, revealing itself in the glow of the street lamp. It was someone Greg didn't expect to see tonight. Someone he thought he'd left behind. Marissa Caldwell. The investor, the one who had shouted at him during the gala about risking everything. But now she wasn't angry. She wasn't scolding. She was pointing frantically, shouting something he couldn't hear over the engine and wind. Greg realized immediately, she wasn't here to lecture. She was warning. He caught the movement of the shadow SUV slowing behind the taxi. Marissa's sudden appearance blocked the vehicle's line of sight, forcing it to brake unexpectedly. Greg seized the moment. He maneuvered the taxi into a safer lane, using Marissa as cover. The black SUV tried to regain position, but Greg's precision and calm under pressure allowed them to slip past the immediate threat. Janelle exhaled, relief mixing with fear. Serenity pressed against her mother, still trembling. Greg didn't relax. He knew this was only a temporary victory. The hunters were still out there. Calvin's reach was long, and the unknown players had yet to reveal their full intentions. Marissa approached on foot, her voice urgent. "Get to the alleyway on the next block. I've cleared a route. You'll be safe, temporarily. But you need to move fast." Greg nodded. "Thank you. But what about you?" She smiled grimly. "I have my own reasons for staying out of the SUV's path. Go. Now." Greg followed her instructions, guiding the taxi into the alleyway. The shadows of the night closed in, and the echoes of distant engines reminded him that this was far from over. As they disappeared into the maze of side streets, Greg's thoughts turned to the bigger picture. Calvin, Troy, the unknown second player, Marissa. They were all part of a larger game. A game he hadn't signed up for. A game he had to win if he wanted to protect Serenity and Janelle. And then, as the taxi rounded a corner and Greg followed closely behind, a new vehicle appeared at the far end of the alley. Its headlights glowed ominously, cutting through the darkness. And inside, a figure leaned forward, waiting, watching, smiling. Someone Greg never expected to see in this city again. The alley stretched ahead like a narrow throat, the walls rising on both sides, damp and cold from the Seattle mist. Greg slowed his car to a crawl, his eyes locked on the vehicle waiting at the far end. Its headlights glowed harshly, creating long shadows that warped across the pavement. Behind him, the taxi carrying Janelle and Serenity rolled to a stop. Inside, Serenity pressed her small face to the window, sensing the danger even without understanding it. Janelle's hands shook tight around the seat as she whispered, "Greg, who is that?" Greg didn't answer immediately. He stared forward, muscles rigid, breath tight. He knew that silhouette. He recognized the posture, the way the figure leaned forward slightly, as if savoring the moment before revealing the next move. The driver door of the mysterious vehicle clicked open. A man stepped out. Tall, clean-cut, confident. Greg's stomach twisted. Chandler Reeves. The one person Greg never expected, or wanted, to confront again. The man wasn't just a business rival. He was a ghost from a darker chapter of Greg's past. A man who had once stood beside him in boardrooms, and nearly destroyed him outside them. Chandler wiped raindrops from his shoulders and walked forward, each footstep deliberate. The alley's dim lighting painted long shadows behind him. Greg stepped out of his car slowly, keeping his body angled to shield the taxi. Chandler stopped just far enough to keep tension coiled between them like a wire. "Gregory Cole," Chandler said with a slow, almost amused sigh. "You always did like dramatic entrances. And exits." Greg didn't move. "Why are you here?" "Come on," Chandler smirked. "We both know this isn't about why. It's about who." And about what you didn't finish years ago. Janelle cracked her window, heart pounding. Serenity clung to her arm, sensing the tension rising like static in the air. Greg's voice turned cold. If you came here because of Calvin, then you're making a mistake. Walk away now. Calvin? Chandler laughed. You think I'd follow orders from a man unraveling himself in public? His smirk faded, replaced by something darker. No, Greg. Calvin's a pawn. He always was. You're the one I came for. Greg's pulse thudded. Chandler wasn't bluffing. This wasn't some corporate disagreement. This was personal, and it always had been. Chandler took another step, lowering his voice. Do you think I don't know about the girl? About the mother? About how you've been playing hero? His eyes flickered toward the taxi. How sweet. How predictable. Greg clenched his fists. He'd faced Chandler before, but back then the stakes had only been money. Deals. Influence. Now it was lives. Janelle whispered, her voice trembling. Is he dangerous? Greg didn't turn, didn't even blink. Stay inside. Lock the doors. Chandler raised an eyebrow. Protective now, are we? Interesting. You never played guardian before. Greg stepped forward. I'm not letting you near them. Chandler smirked. You don't get to decide that. Not after what you took from me. A cold wind swept through the alley, carrying the distant hum of the city, sirens, cars, nightlife, but in this narrow corridor, everything felt still. The kind of stillness before a storm breaks. Greg's memories flashed, betrayals, old deals, the moment Chandler had pushed too far, and Greg had pushed back. He thought that chapter had been buried. He was wrong. Chandler's voice softened, almost conversational. You've been busy, Greg. Making enemies. Making alliances. Rescuing damsels. He leaned in slightly. But you forgot something. Every move you make leaves a trail. And some people, he tapped his temple, know how to follow trails better than others. Greg's jaw tightened. You're not touching them. Touch them? Chandler tilted his head, pretending to consider the idea. Oh, Greg, you misunderstand. I don't need to touch them. I just need to put pressure in the right places. Make the right people nervous. Shift a few power pieces around. He smiled thinly. And watch you unravel. The headlights behind Chandler flickered. Another vehicle pulling into position. Not one of Calvin's. Another shadow entirely. Greg's stomach dropped. Chandler wasn't alone. Don't, Greg warned. Chandler raised both hands theatrically. Relax. We're just talking. For now. Janelle's breath hitched when she saw movement behind Chandler, two figures stepping out of another car. Dressed in dark jackets. Faces obscured by hoods. Greg shifted into a defensive stance immediately. Chandler clicked his tongue. Always so reactive. His tone turned chilling. Let's make this simple. You walk away from them. From the mother, the child, all of it. Tonight. Right now. And I call everything off. Greg didn't move. You know I can't do that, he said quietly. Oh, I think you can, Chandler replied. You will. Because if you don't, he nodded toward the cab. I will make sure the shadows following you tonight become permanent fixtures. Serenity whimpered softly. Mommy? I don't like this. Janelle swallowed hard. Greg, please? Greg didn't look back at them. He couldn't afford to. One wrong signal, one sign of vulnerability, and Chandler would strike where it hurt most. Greg lifted his chin. If you want me, Chandler, then take me. But they walk away. Chandler chuckled and gave an approving nod. Ah, the noble act. Greg, you always were better suited for drama than business. Greg took a step closer. Chandler's men shifted slightly, anticipating a confrontation. Greg kept his gaze locked on Chandler, every muscle in his body coiled. Then Greg said something he knew would force Chandler's hand. You're not the one calling the shots anymore, are you? Chandler's expression snapped. For the first time that night, his composure cracked. It's someone else, isn't it? Greg pressed. Someone higher. Someone using you the same way they're using Calvin. Chandler's nostrils flared. He stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. You don't know what line you're crossing, he hissed. Greg didn't back away. Try me. A tense silence wrapped the alley like a noose. Then Chandler lifted 2 fingers and flicked them. A signal. The 2 shadowed men moved in unison, reaching inside their jackets. Janelle gasped. Serenity cried out. Greg tensed. But before the men could take another step, a sharp screech echoed from behind, the sound of another vehicle barreling into the alley. A sedan swung into view, headlights blazing, engine roaring, and skidded between Greg and Chandler's men. The door flew open. A familiar voice shouted, "Greg, get them out, now." Greg's eyes widened. It was Marissa, covered in sweat, breathing hard, fierce. The alley erupted in motion. Shouts, footsteps, the glare of headlights, and Chandler's furious roar. Greg spun toward the taxi. Janelle, go, now. And with that command, the alley exploded into chaos. The drive back into downtown Portland felt quieter than usual. Even the hum of traffic seemed muted, as though the entire city understood that something delicate was happening in Elijah's car. Rain streaked the windshield, turning the streetlights into long, trembling reflections that glided across the glass like ghosts passing by. In the back seat, Harper was unusually quiet. She had spent the whole morning talking, excited about her new dress, thrilled about the dance, asking Elijah questions faster than he could answer them. But now her silence carried weight. She was hugging her sketchbook to her chest, staring out at the rain with wide, thoughtful eyes. Elijah kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror. You doing okay back there, kiddo? Harper nodded but didn't look away from the window. Yeah. I'm just thinking. That sentence worried him more than anything. When Harper didn't want to talk, something was wrong. Beside him in the passenger seat, Nina turned slightly, watching Harper with gentle concern. Nina had joined them for lunch after the shopping trip, and Harper had insisted she come along for the drive home. To Elijah's surprise, Nina had become someone Harper trusted, almost instantly. What are you thinking about? Nina asked softly. Harper hesitated. What if I mess up at the dance? What if people look at me weird because you're not really my dad? Elijah's grip on the wheel tightened. There it was, the fear he knew had been sitting inside her since the beginning. Harper, Elijah said, his voice steady. No one is going to look at you weird. And I may not be your father, but I care about you. A lot. And I'm proud to take you. Harper's eyes finally lifted to the mirror. Really? Really? Nina smiled at her. Besides, you look beautiful in your dress. No one is going to notice anything except how excited you are. Harper's shoulders relaxed as she gave a shy smile. But right then, something else on the passenger seat caught Nina's eye. An envelope. A plain white envelope, tucked under Elijah's phone. Elijah? Nina picked it up and held it carefully. What's this? Elijah's face shifted. Oh, that. I haven't opened it yet. Nina's brows lifted. It looks important. It is, Elijah admitted. It's from the investigator I hired, about Harper's father. The car went silent. Harper froze in the back seat, her hand tightening around her sketchbook so hard the edges bent. Her voice came out small. You found him? We don't know yet, Elijah said quickly. I haven't read the letter. I didn't want to open it until after the dance. I didn't want anything messing with your day. Nina frowned. Elijah, it might not be good to keep waiting. But Harper was staring at the envelope like it was a bomb. Can you read it? She whispered. Elijah's heart cracked a little. She wasn't trembling, but her eyes held that familiar mixture of hope and fear, the same look she had when she stood on the sidewalk holding her cardboard sign the first time he saw her. Elijah pulled into an empty parking lot near the waterfront. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the roof in steady, tense beats. He turned off the engine, and the sudden quietness inside the car only made everything feel heavier. Nina passed the envelope into his hands. Elijah, Harper said, voice barely above a breath, I need to know. He swallowed and tore open the seal. The investigator's letter was short, just a single page, but the words hit like a blow. He read silently first. His gaze slowed. His jaw tightened. Harper leaned forward, gripping the back of his seat. What does it say? Please, tell me. Nina placed a reassuring hand on Harper's arm, but she looked worried too. Elijah took a breath. Harper, they found something. Her breath caught. But your father wasn't who we expected. Elijah looked down at the paper, struggling to soften the truth. He was using a false name. And according to the report, he was involved in some financial crimes. Big ones. He left Oregon 5 years ago. No forwarding address. No contact with anyone, not even relatives. Harper blinked slowly, confusion mixing with disbelief. So, he didn't leave because he didn't want me? Elijah exhaled. No. Harper, your father might not have been a good man. But leaving, it wasn't because of you. It was because he was running from something. Harper's voice cracked. But he still chose to go. And he never tried to see me again. Elijah hated this part more than anything. I'm sorry. Harper wiped her nose with the sleeve of her jacket. So he's just gone? Nina leaned toward her gently. It means he made mistakes, Harper. Bad ones. But that has nothing to do with your worth. Harper looked down at her sketchbook, whispering, Why didn't he want me? The word stabbed Elijah like a knife. Harper, he said, turning around in his seat so he could look at her directly. I can't pretend to know what he was thinking. But I do know this. You are not someone people walk away from. You're brave. You're kind. You're smart. And any parent would be lucky to have you. Harper's eyes brimmed with tears. Do you believe that? Elijah's voice softened. More than anything. And just when he thought the moment might settle, Harper suddenly leaned forward and placed her sketchbook in his lap. Then, can you open it? She whispered. Elijah blinked. Your sketchbook. She nodded. There's something inside. I didn't want to show it until after the dance. But I think I need to now. Nina sat up straighter, sensing something important. Elijah opened the sketchbook. The first pages were drawings he'd seen before. Sketches of her mom, doodles of the apartment building, animals, flowers. Then halfway through the drawings changed. A man. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. A man that looked a little like him. Elijah froze. Harper, who is this? Harper's voice shook. I started drawing him the day after my mom died. I didn't know why. I just kept seeing him in my head. And then, I saw you on the street. Elijah felt the air leave his lungs. It was you, she whispered. I kept drawing you and I didn't even know who you were. I think I was hoping someone like you existed. Nina covered her mouth, tears forming. Harper wiped her cheeks. I know you're not my real dad. But maybe the reason I drew you is because I was supposed to meet you. Elijah felt his throat tighten so hard he couldn't speak. And then Harper said the one thing that shattered him completely. Can you still take me to the dance, even if my father doesn't want me? Elijah turned fully toward her, his voice steady, stronger than he expected. Harper, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere. And yes, I'm taking you. Nothing changes that. Harper closed her eyes, tears slipping down her face, but she nodded. A small, fragile relief washed over her features. Nina wiped her own tears quietly. You two, you're exactly what each other needed. Elijah placed the sketchbook back in Harper's hands. Thank you for showing me. She hugged it to her chest again and whispered, Thank you for staying. But just as Elijah reached for the keys to restart the car, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a call from an unknown number. At first he ignored it. Then the number flashed again. And again. Harper leaned forward. Who is it? Elijah frowned. I don't know. Nina's voice tightened. Answer it. He picked up the phone and pressed it to his ear. Hello. A strained, unfamiliar male voice came through the speaker. Is this Elijah Grant? Yes. Who is this? The voice trembled. I heard you've been looking for me. Elijah froze. Nina's eyes widened. Harper's breath stopped. The voice continued, shaking. My name is Daniel Cole. I'm Harper's father. And then the line went quiet. Elijah's hand tightened around the phone as the voice on the other end spoke the name no one expected to hear again. Daniel Cole. Harper's father. For several seconds, Elijah couldn't breathe. The rain kept drumming on the roof, the world outside moving in gray streaks, but inside the car everything felt frozen. Nina's eyes were fixed on him, filled with alarm, while Harper held the edges of her sketchbook so tight her knuckles turned white. Elijah swallowed hard. "Daniel, where are you?" A shaky breath came through the line. "I'm still in Oregon. I've been keeping an eye on things." Something in his tone was unsettling, fragile yet guarded. "Elijah?" Harper whispered, fear spreading across her face as she leaned forward. He covered the bottom of the phone with his palm. "It's okay. I've got this." When he lifted the phone back to his ear, Daniel continued. "I heard someone was looking into my past. Into me. Took me a while to confirm it was you." Elijah glanced at Harper again. "I'm doing what's best for her." Another pause. Then Daniel's voice dropped. "I want to see her." Harper's breath hitched. Nina stiffened. "No. Not like this," she whispered under her breath. Elijah kept his voice level. "You can't just call after 5 years and—" Daniel cut him off. "I didn't know if I should come back. I didn't know if I deserved to." He exhaled, the sound hollow. "But if you found me, maybe it's time." That single sentence was enough to unravel Harper. Tears welled in her eyes, uncertainty swirling inside them. She didn't speak, but everything she felt was obvious. Fear, confusion, longing. "Elijah," Daniel added, his tone shifting, "I want to explain myself." Elijah took a slow breath. "Where are you?" Daniel hesitated before saying, "I'm near the old interstate bridge. Motel off the highway. Room 214. Elijah's pulse quickened. That area wasn't dangerous exactly, but it wasn't welcoming either. A place people chose when they didn't want to be found. "At least let me talk to her," Daniel murmured. Elijah tensed. "Not yet." "Please," Daniel whispered. That word hung in the air, heavy and conflicted. Was it genuine? Manipulative? Elijah couldn't tell. "This isn't the right moment," Elijah said firmly. "I'll call you back." Daniel's voice wavered. "Don't take too long, Elijah. I don't know how much time I have." The line went dead. Elijah slowly lowered the phone. For a long moment no one spoke. The rain's steady beat was the only sound, matching the tension inside the car. Finally Harper whispered, "He's really alive?" Elijah turned toward her. "Yes." "And he wants to see me?" Her voice trembled. Nina reached back and gently brushed a curl from Harper's forehead. "Wanting to see you doesn't mean he's safe or ready." "But he called," Harper insisted, her eyes filling again. "He called because you looked for him." Elijah's ribs tightened around his chest. She wasn't wrong. But something about Daniel's tone gnawed at him. Too shaky to trust, too emotional to read clearly. "Harper," he said softly, "just because someone is your parent doesn't mean they're ready to be the person you need." Harper blinked, tears sliding down. "But he might be." The conflict in her voice was almost too much to bear. Nina leaned closer. "Honey, we're not saying no. We just need to be careful." Harper stared down at her hands. "I don't want to get hurt again." Elijah felt that slice through him. He reached back and gently took her hand. "I won't let that happen," he said. "Not this time." But Harper wasn't done. She looked up, gaze deep and vulnerable. "Can I decide?" she whispered. "Can I be the one to choose if I want to see him?" Elijah's breath halted. That was the question he wasn't prepared for. Nina stared at Harper with admiration and concern all at once. "You're brave," she murmured. "Braver than most adults." Harper didn't smile. She didn't blink. She waited. Finally Elijah nodded. "Yes, you can choose. But only with someone you trust there with you." Harper wiped her cheek. "I want you there." Elijah swallowed hard. "Always." The moment hung in the air, fragile but honest. Then Harper glanced at the envelope again. "Is that why he left? Because he was in trouble?" Elijah shook his head slowly. "We don't know the whole truth. Not yet." Harper looked down at the sketchbook in her lap. "What if he lies?" Nina placed her hand over Harper's. "Then you trust what you feel, not what he says." Harper breathed shakily. "I don't want to be scared anymore." Elijah turned back in his seat. You won't be. Not with us. They sat in silence for several minutes before Harper whispered, Can we go? Not to see him. I just want to go home. Elijah nodded immediately. Yes, of course. He started the car. The engine hummed to life, headlights cutting through the sheets of rain as he pulled onto the road. Nina watched Harper quietly, her expression soft but pained. Elijah could feel the tension radiating off her, and he knew she wanted to say something. He waited until Harper leaned against the window, eyes half closed from emotional exhaustion. Only then did Nina speak in a low voice. Elijah, this could get complicated. I know. He might want custody. Elijah's chest tightened. After 5 years? He abandoned her. People like him, Nina murmured, they don't always follow the rules. They cause chaos and leave others to clean it up. Elijah gripped the wheel. He's not taking her. You're not her father, Nina reminded gently. That doesn't matter. I'm the one showing up. Nina's voice held respect mixed with worry. Yes, but people like Daniel, they know how to twist situations. We need to be smart. Elijah's jaw set. Then we'll be smart. Nina laid a hand on his arm. She loves you. I hope you know that. Elijah glanced at the mirror. Harper was curled up, asleep now, clutching her sketchbook like a lifeline. I love her too, he whispered. And that truth settled into the air between them, unspoken but undeniable. 30 minutes later, they pulled into Harper's apartment building. Elijah carried her inside as she slept, her head against his shoulder. Nina unlocked the door with the spare key Harper had given her some time ago. He laid Harper gently on her bed, pulled her blanket over her, and quietly stepped into the hallway. Nina closed the door behind her, watching him with long, searching eyes. What are you going to do? She asked. Elijah exhaled. I'm going to see Daniel first. Alone. I need to know what kind of man he is before Harper gets anywhere near him. Nina nodded slowly. Do you want me to come? No. This is something I need to handle. But, thank you. She touched his arm. Be careful. I will. He stepped out into the hallway. His footsteps echoed through the old building as he headed toward the exit. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the sky dimming with early evening. Elijah walked to his car, only to stop dead in his tracks. There was something tucked under his windshield wiper. A folded note. His stomach tightened as he pulled it free. The handwriting was sharp, hurried. If you're going to come see me, come alone. And come soon. You're not the only one looking for me. It wasn't signed. But Elijah knew exactly who left it. He looked toward the empty street, a chill crawling down his spine. Daniel Cole wasn't just desperate. He was being hunted. The motel off the old interstate bridge sat crouched beneath the gray evening sky like something forgotten by time. Pale yellow lights flickered along the balconies, buzzing faintly. Paint peeled from the doors. A stray cat darted under a dumpster when Elijah pulled into the cracked parking lot. He gripped the steering wheel, replaying the message left under his wiper. You're not the only one looking for me. The words gnawed at him, sharp and uneasy. If Daniel was being hunted, then whatever trouble he'd been tangled in years ago was catching up to him now. For a moment, Elijah considered turning back. Calling Nina. Calling the police. But what if whoever was after Daniel found Harper first? No. He needed answers. Needed control. Needed to see the man himself. He stepped out of the car, the cold air slapping his face as the wind whipped through the narrow corridors of the motel. The rain had slowed to a mist, leaving the pavement reflective and slick. Room 214. He climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath his weight. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and stale cigarette smoke. At the top of the stairs he found the door. The metal numbers were rusted and slightly crooked. Elijah knocked once. Twice. The door unlatched. Slowly it opened. Daniel Cole stepped into view. He was nothing like the picture Harper kept in her mind. Nothing like the man Elijah imagined. Daniel looked older than his mid-40s, years of stress etched deep lines around his eyes. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt, and his clothes looked like they'd been worn for days. But his eyes. Those were Harper's. Soft, searching, lost. Elijah Grant, Daniel said with a quiet breath. You came. Elijah didn't move inside. We talk here. Door open. Daniel didn't argue. That's fair. He stepped back just enough to lean against the doorframe. His posture was slouched as if he'd been carrying weight far too long. You said people were looking for you, Elijah started. Who? Daniel's gaze flickered down the hallway before he answered. The same people I ran from 5 years ago. I made mistakes, Elijah. Big ones. Worked with the wrong men. Trusted the wrong promises. Elijah folded his arms. That explains why you disappeared. Not why you stayed gone. Daniel exhaled sharply, pained. You think I didn't want to go back? You think I didn't think about her every day? His voice shook. I knew if I returned they would have followed me. And Harper, she would have been in danger. Elijah studied him. You left her without a word. No letters. No calls. Daniel's face tightened. What was I supposed to say? Your dad ruined everything, sweetheart, but don't worry, I'll be back after I run from criminals for however long it takes. His voice broke. I thought disappearing would protect her. Elijah didn't soften. She didn't feel protected. She felt abandoned. Daniel closed his eyes. The wind whistled past the balcony. Elijah, he whispered, I'm not here to pretend I was a good father. I wasn't. I failed her. Failed her mother. I've failed at everything. For the first time his voice held something raw. Something almost honest. But when I heard someone was looking into my past, Daniel continued, I thought maybe it meant Harper still cared. Still wondered. Elijah shook his head. It meant she needed closure. She needed truth. That's why I searched. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. What do you want from me? I want to know the truth, Elijah said. What you plan to do. What you expect. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. I don't expect anything. I'm not fit to be in her life. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. That's all. Elijah's jaw clenched. She's more than okay. She's extraordinary. A shadow softened Daniel's expression. Yeah, she always was. Silence stretched between them. Elijah finally spoke. She wants to decide if she sees you. But I'll only let that happen if I know you're not a threat. Daniel scoffed. A threat? Elijah, I can barely hold myself together. I'm running from people who want to silence me, not after her. They don't even know she exists. Are you sure? Elijah demanded. Someone followed me today. Someone left a note. Daniel's eyes widened. What did it say? Elijah repeated it. You're not the only one looking for me. Daniel's face drained of color. That means they know you talked to me, he whispered. They're close. Elijah felt a cold spike of fear stab through him. So Harper. Daniel raised a hand quickly. No. Elijah, listen. They won't go after her. They only want me because I have information. Information I stole when I left. Information that could put them away for decades. Then turn it in, Elijah snapped. Talk to authorities. Daniel laughed bitterly. And end up dead in a ditch within a week? The police can't protect me from men like this. Elijah stepped closer, voice hard. And what about Harper? What happens if all this catches up to her? Daniel's eyes glistened. That's why I called. Not to see her. Not to take her away. He swallowed hard. To tell you I'm leaving Oregon tonight. Elijah froze. Leaving? Daniel nodded. I'll disappear again. Farther this time. And I won't come back. She'll be safer without me anywhere near her. Elijah stared at him, stunned. You came back, just to leave again? Daniel's voice cracked. I came back because I needed to know she had someone. Someone better than me. When I found out about you, about how you looked for her father, how you cared for her, I knew she did. Elijah stiffened. She's not mine. Daniel shook his head. You love her like she is. Elijah didn't deny it. Daniel stepped forward just an inch, eyes desperate. Tell her she was never the reason I ran. Tell her she deserved better than me. Tell her that I loved her even when I didn't know how to show it. The raw ache in his voice stunned Elijah. For the first time he didn't hear excuses. He heard truth. Broken. Imperfect. But truth. Elijah, Daniel whispered, she doesn't need me. She needs stability. Safety. Someone who stays. Elijah swallowed. Are you asking me to take that place? Only if you want it, Daniel said softly. Only if you think she wants it too. Elijah felt something shift in the air, heavy, irreversible. Daniel exhaled shakily. I'm going to disappear tonight. Please, protect her. Be the man I couldn't be. Elijah stepped toward him. Daniel. But Daniel stepped back into the room. Tell her I'm sorry, he whispered. And he shut the door. A soft click. Then silence. Elijah stood frozen in the hallway, the weight of everything pressing onto his shoulders. The motel lights flickered overhead, and the rain finally stopped. It was over. Or at least, one part of it. 2 hours later, Elijah returned to Harper's apartment. Nina opened the door, worry etched all over her face. Well, she whispered. Elijah stepped inside. His voice was quiet but steady. He's gone. Nina didn't ask where. She didn't have to. Elijah walked down the hall to Harper's room. She was awake now, sitting up in bed, sketchbook in her lap. When she saw him, she looked both hopeful and scared. Elijah, did you talk to him? He sat on the edge of the bed. I did. What did he say? Elijah exhaled slowly. He said he loves you. He said he's sorry. And he said he wants you to be safe. His voice softened. And he asked me to look after you. Harper's eyes filled instantly. Are you going to? Elijah brushed a tear from her cheek. If you want me to. Harper didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. I choose you, she whispered. I choose you. Elijah wrapped his arms around her, emotion overwhelming him. I choose you too. Nina watched from the doorway, tears slipping down her face, a soft smile forming. For the first time in a long time, Harper felt safe. For the first time, Elijah felt complete. The father-daughter dance was only hours away. And when they walked into that school gym tomorrow night, everyone would see what Harper already knew. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the person who shows up, and stays, and chooses you back.